Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, while I was watching the game tonight between the Browns and the Jets, I had one thought going through my head, and that's how annoying it is to have something loud and obnoxious playing in the background during like something you're trying to focus on. Like the whole game, it felt like the pounding of the stadium like walls, the way they had placed the mics was like it was picking it up every single time. How annoying must that be to like have something kind of like in the background, like during a recording or broadcast? How annoying must that have been for everyone involved? Can you imagine being in that sort of situation?
Yeah, it's honestly unimaginable. That would be so obnoxious to me. But if it started happening, I would see if that situation could be resolved sooner rather than later. Honestly, like if I had any modicum of control over it, or if I had an interface with someone directly involved or responsible for the noise situation, I would kind of like let them know as soon as I had noticed that something had gone awry. So yeah, I mean that sounds pretty obnoxious, but yeah, there's probably ways around it.
Yeah, you definitely want to talk about it as soon as you noticed it, but that's just me. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have a game to preview. The Vikings are going to be taking on the Packers here, so we have a Sunday night game to go over. A little bit of I suppose we can talk a little bit about what happened this last weekend as well against the Lions, but it's less fun that way. A lot of interceptions. So we'll get into that as well. But before we start, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and join up there for $3.50 a month or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to stuff like the Discord, bonus episodes, all of that over at patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and have all sorts of fun with any number of Arif and James items, and the Arif socks are still available. They have not sold out. They are ready for you.
Bafflingly, they've not sold out.
Yeah, I don't... it's kind of weird. But it's a thing, and you can get it over at norsecode.threadless.com.
I'll say this real quick. We have every year my brother goes to an ugly sweater party. I come along, and I brought my Arif sweater as the ugly sweater, which no one said to me, "Hey, that you shouldn't consider a sweater with your face on it an ugly sweater. That suggests something about your self-esteem or confidence." No one said that to me, which is a little bit concerning. And even more concerning was that this sweater was a hit. A bunch of people were like, "You win the ugly sweater party with this sweater that has a picture of your face on it." And I was like, "That's great. That's good. That was the goal. That's why I'm here." Luckily, also, the party had a lot of alcohol, which unrelated actually to the thing I just said. Let's just say that.
So you're saying as they drank, the sweater looked better.
Yeah, and they came to appreciate it for its aesthetic qualities in a positive sense rather than the nominally negative sense.
So if you want to win your ugly sweater party, yeah, I don't know if that actually works, but you can still get it over at norsecode.threadless.com. And with that, we are going to head over to an interview that Arif conducted earlier today with known team captain. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Justis Mosqueda. He is editor-in-chief at the Packers SB Nation blog, and just generally Packers-specific guy. He's been on the show a million times, literally since the first year. And boy, does he sound young there. So 10 years of justice. That's a terrible name, actually. 10 years of justice.
10 years of justice. Man, that's like an It's a Oscar-winning film, I guess is the best way I can put it.
I mean, you realize if you would have hit him with your car, you'd be out now. Like, that's probably...
What car, James? What car?
Oh, Oh, I wasn't even trying there. Well, here's Justice Mosqueda, and we'll be back on the other side of this to talk about the Vikings Lions game.
All right, I'm here with least valuable podcaster, self-appointed captain, Justice Mosqueda. How you doing?
Coach didn't know I was from Charlotte. Yeah.
Okay, he seemed like okay. So for people who are unfamiliar, Jair Alexander decided, I guess, that he should have been a captain because he's from there, from North Carolina, and so he just figured he would be if the coach had known. He just walked out there with the captains for the coin toss, called the toss, and then said, "We'll defend." Right?
Correct.
Is that what happened?
Yes, correct. And then
the referee had to correct him to say, "You mean defer?"
Yes. Just another example of the Packers getting on the right ends of some referees, right?
Yeah, no, this is absolutely ref bias at play once again. And then after the game, he was like pretty nonchalant about it.
Jair's a weird guy, man. We've been saying this for weeks because he's done weird things like strolled into the locker room after practice, hoisting 2 different WWE championship belts, one that adorned his face on the front of it, and would say things like, "I'm just going to lie to the media anyway, so go ahead and ask your questions, but I'm not going to tell you guys anything."
What?
He's just an odd dude. So,
did he get it custom made? Sorry, it has his face on it, so
yes,
he had to have gotten it custom made.
100%. Like, it still had the plastic on it, custom made.
Oh my god. How much does that go for, do you think?
I don't know, but I figure if you're an athlete, someone just
People will
DMs
overcharge you.
Someone just DMs you on Instagram and it's like, "Do you want a wrestling belt made with your face on it?" And you just have to say, "Yeah," right?
You have to.
How do you turn down that, on principle? But yeah, I mean, Jair's a weird dude. Jair's a guy who like hangs out in Green Bay all off season and then leaves during OTAs because he like doesn't like being around people, right? Like, we're talking about an odd guy. So,
okay, sure. So the team suspended him for that
conduct detrimental to the team, which would have voided any of his guarantees if he had any. Yeah.
Wait, he doesn't have guarantees?
No. So when he signed his extension, all $30 million of that was guaranteed in his contract came in the form of a signing bonus. So everything is year by year.
Okay. Well, I mean, that affords you some degree of security just for dead cap reasons, but that sucks. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk. Well, actually, no. I mean, we're already talking about the corner. Let's talk about the Packers. Let's start with the Packers defense. I know that's every Packers fan's favorite subject, especially right now. So all-world defensive coordinator Joe Barry, one of the longest tenured defensive coordinators in the NFL, so we know he's good, has been under some criticism from the Packers faithful. This is surprising. I've never heard of this, that people will criticize Joe Barry. What's the issue?
Did you see how he ended his press conference today? Did you catch that at all?
What's going on?
He answered a question about what it would mean for guys to play well for him in the last 2 weeks. And the final words that came out of Joe Barry's mouth on his weekly press conference was, "I just want to win for the Green Bay Packers." So that is where we're at currently. 2 weeks ago, after Devondre Campbell kind of got lit up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the inside linebacker basically came out and said on Twitter, like, "I'm not going to play hurt anymore then." And he hasn't been at practice since. So,
yeah. Because he's, like, on the injury report. Like,
yeah, with the neck injury that neck injury predates that Tampa game, which, again, was 2 Sundays ago, right? So, like, maybe this is something that he would have played through in the past, but now he's just done sacrificing his body for this version of the team. Yeah, I mean, career days for Tommy DeVito, who has since been benched, Baker Mayfield, who, like, legitimately had, like, one of the best performances in the NFL this past season, or in that game. Both of those guys won NFC Player of the Week. and then Bryce Young, who's been all-time bad as a rookie, and
he
was
had a pretty good
nominated
game.
for NFC Player of the Week. So, Jaron Hall, come on down.
He's Packers are turning some careers around. You love to see it.
Well, for at least a couple of weeks, the Tommy DeVito thing kind of shows us that, this thing might not last, but you can get the Packers defense.
All right. Okay. So you seem pretty positive about the Packers defense. That's great to hear. So it sounds like TJ Slayton will play based off the injury report. So what is that defensive line overall, or he won't play?
I think we're kind of uncertain right now. Slayton's been pretty good about participating in games, even if he has been hurt. He was limited on Wednesday, so I don't know if the way the Packers generally do it is if they have a padded practice, it's on Thursday. So maybe they're just going a little light. I would pay attention to the Friday participation report there. I'm not really worried about their interior defensive line. Kenny Clark's been playing end, Wyatt's playing end, Slayton's been starting at the nose, and then the next guy up is Carl Brooks. So I think if Slayton is out, Kenny probably moves to the nose, and Brooks probably starts at end. But that's not a bad lineup by any means.
Okay, well, so what within the Joe Barry defense? What is the function of that interior defensive line unit? Do they tend to rush a lot? Are they occupying blockers? Do they make space for stunts, twits, and other blitzers? Or what is the function there?
Well, last week it was a whole lot of man coverage and twists and stuff like that. We hadn't seen that previously.
So Barry's fighting for his life.
Barry is fighting for his life. He is changing things up, and it did not work. The same thing happened against the Buccaneers. They basically got into one man coverage look, and then immediately got dotted, and then we're like, all right, out of that again. Just not very good football, man. Just not very good football on that side of the ball.
Okay, so we'll talk about the front a little bit more, but we've been talking a little bit about defensive backs. We've talked a little bit about man coverage. Who is going to be out there, especially with that Jair Alexander? Will it still include Eric Stokes? Is Keyshawn Nixon still in the nickel? Or is it the Valentine brothers?
No, so it'll be Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes with Keyshawn in the nickel. Okay. Stokes sometimes has been left out of the lineup for certain drives, just because he's kind of working himself back into football shape. For Vikings
he still hasn't recovered from the time I called him mid.
Yeah, so Eric Stokes was in a wheelchair last year. That's how injured.
I got him that bad, huh?
Yeah. Words hurt. He ended the season in a wheelchair, missed the whole second half of the season, missed basically the first half of this season, starting on the PUP. Came back, played, I think, 10 special team snaps, and then blew out his hamstring and went on IR.
Jesus, man.
Real bad stretch for him. I feel terrible for the guy. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple drives where Stokes is out of the game and Ballantyne comes in, but Ballantyne should be next man up at cornerback and not starting.
So Carrington Valentine is a 7th-round pick from this year. He's played a fair amount so far. What's the deal? What do we see from him?
Aggressive, yappy, everything you want out of a 7th-round rookie. I mean, he was a 21-year-old kid coming into the league. He always had man coverage skills, but his big issue was just kind of wrapping up on ball carriers and stuff like that. I think he's gotten a lot better, throughout the summer and the regular season so far. I don't really worry about him as much. Honestly, I worry about Stokes a little bit more than Valentine at this point. And then Valentine is fine if you're going to play a coverage shell and just, have him take up stuff up the sideline and, not have to handle anyone man to man. But if you ever have to play man, that's really when Valentine kind of gets exposed.
And so it sounded like with Joe Barry fighting for his life and playing man coverage a little bit more. I mean, in fairness, the Panthers don't really have receivers, all due respect to Adam Thielen. But it is a little bit different, even with Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson out. It is a little bit different than Justin Jefferson, right? It feels like you're probably not going to be as committed to manning up.
I would assume, hey, he's the X receiver. We're going to cloud him. And, if he's in trips, we're going to play quarters over the top of it and just not let him get anything, right? As long as the safeties don't play like complete bozos like that first time around in 2022 when they just couldn't pass off crossers and stuff like that. I think they should have a half decent coverage plan. The Packers haven't really been getting owned by. Is there SpongeBob chirping in the background? Is that what I'm hearing?
It's playing the whole time. It's dolphin noises.
Why? Oh, goodness gracious. For Aaron Rodgers. I get it.
Yeah. I was, wishing him a speedy recovery. Figured you would know the most about alternative healing practices.
Oh, my goodness. All right, back to my point. The Packers haven't really been getting killed by number one receivers, but I think what makes Jefferson a little different than most is how often that, the Vikings move him around and play him in the slot and stuff like that. So maybe that's one way that they can kind of eat the Packers up, right? Like that's how Tampa was able to use Chris Godwin, for example, and get, matchups on some of these inside linebackers and stuff like that, and basically make Devondre Campbell quit. So, yeah.
Well, so who, we'll get back to the safeties in a second. Who is replacing Devondre Campbell?
That would be Isaiah McDuffie. He's actually played halfway decent. He's definitely a better run defender than he is, a guy in coverage. The Packers, unsurprisingly, kind of play around McDuffie on obvious passing downs. They'll use a guy like Eric Wilson, who I know you're familiar with.
To kind of superstar.
Yep, to kind of spell him on passing downs, or there's an uptick in dime personnel, or penny, where they'll just use one inside linebacker with a nickel on the field, that kind of stuff to kind of make sure McDuffie doesn't get exposed in the passing game, because that kind of tends to happen. The real issue with the Packers is formation width, really. Like, as long as you guys are in like condensed stuff, the Packers are pretty happy, because they can do their 3 up, 3 under coverage stuff, right? Like they can play quarters, everything. As long as things are tight, things are good. When you spread them out, that's when you get the Raiders game and the Buccaneers game, and it's like, oh man, we want to keep 2 high safeties, but also, you're going empty. That means we got to have a hat on a hat. Chris Godwin's in the 3 slot in the slot, and now we have an inside linebacker walked over him, and you just give him a little option route, and he's getting a first down every single time, right?
I mean, that feels like, especially with the Vikings not having access to one of their tight ends, it feels like something that could very easily pop up in this game.
I would agree. I mean, if, I think Kevin O'Connell can figure that one out. So I would be pretty shocked if they didn't try to take advantage of that type of situation. So,
so a big part of that, so back to the safety situation, a big part of that obviously is to have, high level safety play, especially if the safety is going to be a big part of limiting Justin Jefferson, and if they have to be on their P's and Q's to prevent the crossers, which, I mean, Jefferson's been eating people alive on crossers for the past 2 seasons. How do you feel? Like, I think it's Rudy Ford and Jonathan Owens. I don't know anything about Jonathan Owens.
So they've made a recent change. So Rudy Ford has kind of become like the fourth safety for him. So Darnell Savage is iffy.
Wait, fourth?
Yes. So Savage and...
Hold on. How often have the Packers been rotating who's what safety? This feels like it's like every time I ask you, I'm wrong.
Yes. Correct. Yeah. I mean, these guys get hurt a lot. So at the beginning of the year, the starters would have been Darnell Savage and Rudy Ford. I think since then, Ford has started slipping down the depth chart. Now it's Savage and Owens. Savage is
wait. I thought Savage was in the doghouse. What's going on?
No, Savage is back. They love Savage. They rave about Savage.
We were always at war with East Asia. Okay, fine.
Yes. Darnell Savage is dealing with a shoulder injury. Who knows if he's going to start or not? We're at the point now where if Savage is out, the injury replacement is probably Anthony Johnson Jr., the rookie 7th round pick, who's he's gotten a fair bit of playing time this season, so it's not like he's going to be thrust into the fire or anything like that, with Ford kind of being the 4th option there. So that's the situation.
And the 4th option does sometimes see the field?
These guys get hurt. These guys get hurt.
Okay.
Yeah. These guys get hurt. That's the easiest way to explain this.
Okay. So is Darnell Savage, like, because I liked his rookie year. Mind you, he played lights out against the Vikings mostly. But is he like good again, or is he all right? Was he getting with the program? Was that the issue?
He is like an average safety right now.
Okay.
which is an improvement over last year. I mean, last year he was benched
Right.
against, I think it was the Miami Dolphins. They just straight up benched
For Rudy Ford, right? Because they had that
Yes.
bear
Amos.
safety. Yeah.
Bear safety. How dare you?
I'm
Yeah,
right.
Jonathan Owens. I don't know if you've seen the headlines he's been making recently.
Is he the one married to Simone Biles?
Yes, he is.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah.
So we got that whole thing working against us too in terms of the mojo. I don't think
Hold on.
Owens is any
What
good.
exactly? Because he just said he was a catch, right? That was.
He basically said that he found Simone Biles on Tinder. He's a catch, and he didn't know who she was.
Oh, all of that together actually sounds a lot worse than I'm a catch. Like
There's a
'cause
lot. There's a lot of
that's
people
just being
mad at him.
confident. Yeah, I get it. Okay, she's like the LeBron James of gymnastics. It's crazy.
My girl Addie's very mad. I was gonna say my girlfriend, but you know Addie. So yeah, Addie's very mad about this whole situation. So
Yeah, I get it. That's fair. I actually my brother and his friends, they don't know anything about football, so they keep asking me about like Taylor Swift and Simone Biles. So they had to fill me in on the Simone Biles thing. I didn't realize that that's the whole context, which is even worse than I had originally imagined. And then I had to explain to them that actually, yeah, Simone Biles is very good at gymnastics, but you don't realize like how good she is at gymnastics. So it was like a very fun back and forth. Well, I called him the wrong name, so that tells you a lot about him. I thought his name was Jonathan Cooper because there's been like 8 of those in football.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of Jonathan Coopers, but no, Jonathan Owens.
Okay, is she going to be at the game, Simone Biles?
She's usually there for home games. I don't know if she's made an away game.
I feel like the media's got to cover her almost as much as they cover Taylor.
They usually it's a shot or two on the sideline each game. Usually the home games again.
It's not enough. All right, other linebacker, Quay Walker. How's he doing? Is he still bad?
He was named a captain last week. No,
that doesn't tell me anything, man.
He's been fine. He's been fine. He's not making boneheaded mistakes anymore. I think he can still get lost in coverage a little bit, but I mean, this is the NFL. There's like 5 good linebackers. So
you don't care. You don't care about linebackers, so unless it's like Bobby Wagner.
Well,
it's Bobby Wagner. Okay, Fred Warner.
I was like, Bobby Wagner now, the one with the bad back who can barely run. Yeah,
who's been forcing Jordan Brooks to do like all the coverage responsibilities. Yeah,
right. But then everyone, I think PFF has like Wagner super highly rated or something. It's a weird. Bobby Wagner is one of the bigger splits between film Twitter and analytics Twitter. I feel like.
Well, this is what happened to Anthony Barr for a little bit. The Vikings gave him all the easy coverage assignments, and he executed them really well, and so he had a really high PFF coverage grade. I think the same thing's happening to Wagner. It's like, okay, you just stay here, and you've got like 5 yards in either direction, and you're good. And he's like, yeah, got it. Yeah. So Quay Walker doesn't matter because he's a linebacker who's not Luke Kuechly. And he still makes some mistakes in coverage.
Yeah, fair.
Without Hawkinson, does that really like worry you? Are you scared of Ty Chandler catching it over the middle?
No, but the Chargers had a guy who went off against the Packers whose name I still don't. It was like Stone Smart or something like that.
Stone Smart, the former Old Dominion quarterback turned wide receiver.
Yeah, so we had that pop up. I think Tampa had one. What was his name? It might have been Keith.
Former Gophers tight end.
Yeah, he caught a touchdown against the Packers. So I don't know. You might be able to get us on a couple plays with just. I mean, you might be able to line up.
If you get torched by Johnny Munt, that's it for Joe Barry, man.
Let's go Ducks.
We didn't talk about edge rushers. Is Rashawn Gary still like? Is he good again yet?
Yeah. I mean, he's a good power rusher. He will lose contain if your quarterback can scramble. I haven't gone back and watched the film on like the 10 dropbacks that Jaren Hall has had this season, so I can't really tell you anything about.
You know, he's got like rookie, or he's got like college film, right? Like that's like the whole deal with these draft prospects.
I'm not going to watch BYU right now. They're not even any good right now. So
yeah, but it's not now. It's last year.
They weren't any good last year.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I mean.
He's a quarterback. I don't know. You watch
He's 25.
quarterbacks?
I wasn't paying attention to him.
He can scramble.
25-year-old fifth-round quarterback.
He can scramble.
Okay. Well, I'm a little worried that he can break the pocket. I mean, Tommy DeVito was a non-threat as a rusher in every other game that he played at the NFL level and rushed for like 75 yards against the Packers. So, a little worried about contain, but outside of that, the pass rush should be decent. I mean, that's the real story with this Packers defense, right?
You
They play a lot of
the
show
last
coverage.
decade and a half of Packers defenses.
Yeah. They play a lot of show coverage. It really comes down to like, can they get pressure or not, right? So hopefully Rashawn Gary has one of his good games. I mean, Gary's games really come kind of in clusters, right? Like he'll have, 2 back-to-back, 2-sack games, or like a game with like 3 sacks and then go, 2 weeks without registering a pressure. So he's kind of a little up and down there.
That doesn't sound good. You said he was good.
He is good. When he's
Sometimes.
on, he's insane.
So
He
he's
takes
good when
over
he's
the game.
good, and he's not when he's not.
Yeah.
That's not okay. Lucas Van Ness, has he become a player yet? Is he real?
No, he's kind of like their 4th rusher right now. He's playing a lot of special team snaps. I think they're just using this as kind of a redshirt year. Kingsley Enagbare and Preston Smith will both out-snap him.
That sounds depressing. Is that depressing?
No, I mean, this was kind of always the plan. Outside linebacker was like one of the Packers' deepest positions, and they were just like, could not help themselves. They were like, this is a 20-year-old freak athlete. We're just going to take the 20-year-old freak athlete and not care about how he fits in the short term.
You were like trashing Enagbare last year. You hated the guy.
He's weird. Right now on this team, he's actually kind of fits in a half decent role as like the one guy who can chase the backside of like runs and boot action. Because like Preston doesn't really have the legs right now. Van Ness isn't really seeing the field that much. And Gary's a guy who loses contain because he has pretty tight hips. So like Enagbare isn't like an elite pass rusher by any means or anything like that, but like he can chase down backside of run plays, which
So he'd be really good against the Vikings 2 years ago.
Sure, why not? Yeah.
They ran the ball a lot. They did a bunch of boots. It doesn't seem like all that useful.
Probably not. He's Kingsley in the bar.
Yeah. So you take a look at this Vikings offense. You see some quarterback. Who's to say? Ty Chandler. You see a fairly good offensive line, I guess. I don't know. I'm still getting used to it. Justin Jefferson, and then like KJ Osborne, who was having a bad year, but then had the game of his life with Nick Mullins thrown to him. And like Josh Oliver and Johnny Munt. Like, what concerns you about this group aside from obviously Justin Jefferson? But like, if Jefferson is the only answer, could you explain like how you think that he would win specifically against how the Packers are going to respond to him?
I mean, if it's just Jefferson, I think the Packers are shorthanded enough at DB that they wouldn't want to play man coverage. So I think you can get some matchups, again, if you spread out the Packers defense in terms of the width and insert Jefferson into the slot, either at the 2 or 3 spot, right? I think there's opportunities there. The other thing is, Jordan Addison can kind of do some of that stuff too. I don't know if you think Addison is going to play or not. I know he's dealing with that ankle. He was limited today, so I assume that he's going to play, but maybe I'm making a incorrect.
I've been operating with the assumption that he won't, but it would be hugely beneficial, obviously, if he did.
Yeah. So really, I'm more worried about the receivers than anything, but like the running game, the Packers don't really adjust. I mean, the Steelers had 200 rushing yards. I think 2 guys.
Wait, the Steelers? The Najee Harris Steelers? That Steelers?
Buddy, not just the Najee Harris Steelers, the other kid too.
I mean, Jalen Warren's good. I get it, but
he got like 100 rushing yards on the Packers too. So the Packers don't really adjust. Like even when they're playing bad quarterbacks, they're still going to sit in too high and like ask you to run the ball, which some teams are just willing to do. And if you're willing to do that, you might be able to get like 15 play drives on this Packers team. So
the Vikings don't really run the ball. So I don't know, man. I don't know. Even when they've had like backup quarterbacks in, it's like Joshua Dobbs is back there. We're running the ball 11 times.
I mean, I would enjoy it this week if you can, compliment the chap and all that.
So like last week, the Packers decided to run a couple of stunts and twists a little bit more often than usual. They played man coverage more often than usual. That seems pretty unlikely this week. So this defensive line is more likely going to rush for and drop one of their rushers, play in a coverage shell, probably quarter, half. If the Vikings spread them out, they'll be able to isolate a linebacker. That's like a lot of it. Like, you don't think that they'll... Okay, cool.
Yes.
And
when the Packers blitz, it's usually, they're out there in the penny front, or they're out there in their 3-4, and they're just rushing the guys on the line of scrimmage. It's not a whole lot of like inside linebackers getting sent, and they'll just play 3 up, 3 under. Like, that's...
Well, that makes it for pretty easy protection calls then, which is important. You got a rookie. All right, yeah, let's talk about this offense. So I was watching the Panthers game. I mean, Love wasn't that bad. Like, I've been a hater.
No.
I've been
He's
a
like
hater.
Fifth since they played the Vikings. He's like 5th in like EPA per play in the NFL.
Yeah, but they also
something
played
that.
like the Chargers defense and the Giants defense, and it's like these defenses are bad.
Right? They played Spagnuolo.
Yeah, the Chiefs game is the one and he played well in that game too. But that's like the one game.
How dare you?
What?
How dare you? Jordan Love is him, number 1 quarterback in the NFC North.
You don't get close to believing that. He still has like a really, like, he has like the 3rd largest difference between his EPA and success rate, and the other ones are like, the other one is like Baker and somebody who got benched. I forget who, but no, not benched. Justin Fields is the other one, which is like, that's not a great success rate to EPA per play. That's pretty bad. His CPOE against using the next gen stat stuff is like -5. That's pretty inconsistent. So against the Panthers, so the Panthers are weird because they blitzed a lot. They blitzed at like 45-46%. But that's not anything like what the Brian Flores blitzes are going to look like. These blitzes were coming from like players 5-7 yards deep. Jordan Love just had time. So it doesn't feel like very applicable. And then it felt like, does he always throw high? It feels like he's throwing high.
Usually when he misses high. I can't think of too many examples of when he's missed low.
Yeah, well, I mean, the completions are high too, and I feel like it limits the yak. It exposes. People got real mad at Joshua Dobbs for sending Justin Jefferson literally to the hospital, but that's like a high ball. Like, yeah, it put Jefferson in danger. He shouldn't have done it, but I feel like that happens a lot, and I feel like Love throws high a lot, even on completions, where it exposes the receiver.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I like Love. I'm going to be honest. Like, I think Love has been playing well. I know the blitzes are different from Flores, but now he's seen that Flores defense. He's seen Spagnuolo. He's seen Wink Martindale. He's seen Todd Bowles. Like, all of this.
The Wink Martindale stuff actually is pretty relevant because that one's a lot closer. So obviously against the Vikings, he didn't do well. Against the Giants, he did. So what can you tell me about facing those 2 blitz heavy or sim pressure heavy looks got us?
So I think the Packers offense overall has gotten so much better since that Vikings game. Remember that we were talking about this going into that game. And I was like, there's receivers who are just going to run wrong routes. And you were like, what? You were like struggling to understand like how that could happen at the NFL level at like midseason. Everyone is clicking now relatively. And the fact that Aaron Jones is back has kind of opened up a lot of things for the Packers in terms of play action and stuff like that. Because they were really getting themselves into holes by just running A.J. Dillon up the middle and, getting 1 yard on first down. So I think all of that stuff together has kind of helped the offense evolve in general. The one thing that I do have questions about in this game is just the status of the wide receivers, right? Jaden Reed missed last week. Christian Watson missed last week. Dontavian Wicks, they thought he had broken ribs, but the X-rays came back negative, so maybe there's a chance that he plays.
So that's what your best receiver in Dontavian Wicks, your second best receiver in Jaden Reed, and your 6th best receiver in Christian Watson. That's pretty bad.
I would say Watson is probably third.
Third?
Yeah, we can get into a Romeo Doubs conversation if you want to.
Wow, okay. Okay, what did you think of the Wicks and Reed rankings?
Those are correct.
Oh, this rules. This is so weird, dude. Okay.
Those are correct. Yeah. Feed Wicks.
but he's hurt.
He is hurt. He's got the ribs and all that stuff. So I don't know if he's going to end up playing this
the
week.
Packers are, and you've said this before, so I feel somewhat confident saying this, even though this was years ago. The Packers are just much more likely to list injuries on an injury report than most teams. And so you've got a lot of double injuries on here that you don't have for other teams, right? So Wicks has a chest and an ankle.
The chest is what you worry about. Yeah. I mean, he left last week's game with the chest injury. They thought he had broken ribs.
But he doesn't?
He does not have broken ribs. X-rays came back negative.
Okay, so broken ribs are insanely painful for you to think that that's bad.
Right. That's why I'm like, yeah, dude, if you thought you had broken ribs, you're probably not playing this week, especially if you've been DMP in the 2 practices so far. So.
Okay, so there's your best receiver. So Jayden Reed, he was limited today. He was limited yesterday. He's listed as a toe and a chest.
Yeah, so Reed, they haven't directly said what his injury has been, but he's been dealing with a chest injury since the Chargers game. So that was probably like a month ago.
Lit him up? Jesus.
Yeah, this is probably like a month ago at this point. So, and they've been talking about how Reed's been a warrior pushing through the thing, but he had to end up missing last game. So,
yeah, that's not good talk. Yeah, he's been a real warrior. Yeah. That's not a good sign.
He's a warrior pushing through a chest injury, and he also recently had to miss action. Like, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see on Reed. I think Wicks is out. I think Reed is more questionable.
And then Watson. I mean, I think we could just count him out generally, right?
I mean, he hasn't really practiced since he hurt that hamstring.
Since his
so
senior year of college. Actually, that's not fair. He might have gotten injured as a junior too.
I thought you were going to say you were being too mean to him.
Okay. So you wanted to have a conversation. Well, first of all, let's talk about. Yeah, we'll talk about Romeo Doubs in a second. So, what makes Wicks a 5th-round rookie and Reed a 2nd-round rookie the 2 best receivers on the roster? What are the qualities, just generally?
Reed is a ball winner who can also do a lot of gadget play stuff. So, like he's
a ball winner that runs like a 4.3.
Yeah, but he's not very big either. Like they do a bunch of like slot fade stuff with him, all sorts of stuff. There was a while where he got a bunch of touches as like an end around guy. What game was it that they ran the piss out of him? I can't remember, but there was like one game he had like 8 carries. It felt like, if you include like the little touch passes out of the shotgun,
little rocket passes.
Yeah, exactly. Wicks, his big thing is just separation, man. Like he can create separation off of his routes. Really good on in cuts and stuff like that. Mostly like middle of the field type of stuff. So that's really where Wicks wins. Everyone in Green Bay like talks about Wicks in the same way that they talked about Devontae Adams in terms of separation, but they always qualify it with like, hey, I'm not trying to compare him to like a future all-pro wide receiver, but he reminds us a lot about like Devontae and stuff. So
when you say everyone in Green Bay, you mean like the
coaches, players.
Coaches. Okay. Yeah. I was like, I'm not going to listen to some owner. Sorry, not to.
Yeah, it was the guys at the grocery store. That's who I was talking about. That's where I get most of my info, Rafe.
It wouldn't shock me. You've no journalistic credibility.
How dare you?
Okay, and Romeo Doubs, why are we having this conversation? You wanted to put the jacket on him in the preseason of his rookie year.
I did, and then after a really good month his rookie year, teams figured out you could just press him, and he can't do anything against press.
Is that it?
That was the story last season. Yeah, for sure. But really the thing now is just like they kind of look at Dobbs. He's so weird, right? Because he can make really tough contested catches, but he also drops those at the same time. So like people only remember
like a Hopkinson.
Yeah, people only remember like the super impressive ones. And I include the coaching staff in on people because they'll just like they'll just like throw him like way too many like fades in the red zone and stuff like that. And he's just not a very efficient receiver, even though, the high end plays from his highlight reel look really good just in terms of what he can do at the catch point.
If he was used maximally, if he was used as well as the coaching staff could use him, would he be efficient? Or is he inefficient just because of his usage pattern?
I don't know, man. Like, I think like in an ideal world, you play him on third downs in the slot and you have him catch tough balls over the middle.
Like James Washington?
Yeah, like, I guess.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why that was my like Oklahoma State's James Washington, a player everybody remembers.
I do. Real ball knowers.
Well, you were the guy that was tracking like third down catches for receivers in college like it mattered until you realized it didn't.
The other Oklahoma State receiver in the NFL lasted longer than James Washington. People forget that.
Yeah, and you were on James Washington.
No, I was on the other guy.
Oh, okay. You don't even remember his name.
No, he was a Raider.
Well, Mason Rudolph's doing better than both of them.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah. Anything about Malik Heath or Samori Toure I should know about?
Heath is I think he ran like a 4.7, but he's kind of like he's a strong guy. He does a lot of dirty work stuff. I wouldn't call him like the Allen Lazard, like enforcer, run blocker type of guy, but he's 200 plus pounds and can get after it a little bit. He's more of like a yak type of guy with like broken tackles more than just like running away from guys. He's probably the fifth receiver on the depth chart, and Toure is after him. If all three receivers are indeed hurt and going to miss this game, Bo Melton is going to be the guy who's brought up from the practice squad. He's gotten a couple snaps the past 2 weeks, so keep an eye out for him too. There's not that much to say about these guys outside of Dobbs, just because we really haven't seen them kind of play as a collective together, because the Packers have been feeding so many reps to Watson, Reed, Wicks, because they see the investment of, hey, you go through the growing pains this year. And, them missing playing time because of injury is really the only reason that they're not on the field.
So you mentioned that Dobbs has issues against press. I mean, Flores doesn't press all that much. Do you see that changing, or do you think Flores is going to look at that and be like, we should probably press this guy, or are there going to be opportunities, or like how do you see that playing out?
I don't think you're going to get to the point where you're like, we got to take Romeo Dobbs out of the game.
This sounds like he's getting snaps, man. I don't know.
I know, but I don't think that's the situation. I think the skilled players, honestly, if Reed and Wicks are going to be out, I think the skilled players to watch out for are going to be Tucker Kraft, the rookie tight end, and Aaron Jones.
South Dakota State's very own. Yeah, okay. So Luke Musgrave is designated for return. He was on the injury report.
Right.
He was limited. It says kidney, which is always alarming when they list an organ.
Literally lacerated his kidney. I believe the story, the way that they explain it makes it seem like Musgrave woke up in the middle of the night, started pissing blood, and then went to the emergency room, is kind of how this worked out. He lacerated his kidney against the Chargers.
The Chargers took him out too?
Dude, the Chargers game was a bloodbath, man. It was disgusting on multiple levels. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it seems like he wants to play this week, but the Packers aren't. I don't think they're going to put him at any sort of risk. I would be pretty surprised if he lined up. So I think it's going to be Tucker Kraft and
former Viking Ben Sims.
Former Viking Ben Sims, who's been filling out as like a run blocker type of role. Josiah DeGuara kind of plays like the H-back, fullback type of thing, but he's been losing out snaps to both Kraft and Sims as of late. That's kind of what to expect at tight end.
I mean, I like Sims in camp.
Sims is solid. I mean, he just fills in that role, right? Like that third tight end. I guess he was fourth tight end for the Packers to start the season because
DeGuara.
Musgrave. Yeah, Musgrave and DeGuara. I mean, half decent run blocker, athletic, but like not a dynamic pass catcher, play special teams. Like you can get something out of him. I think he's caught a touchdown pass too. The Packers are the first team in NFL history to have 3 rookie tight ends catch touchdown passes in the same season.
Oh, that's pretty stupid. He was pretty good in red zone drills for the Vikings in camps. I was kind of bummed that they let him go for like Nick Muse. Tucker Kraft, is he any good? Do you like him?
Yeah, he has hurdled multiple players over multiple games. Way more dynamic with the ball in his hand than Musgrave was. Musgrave is more
because he can like turn, right? Like
right,
Musgrave.
exactly. Yeah, Musgrave can, like, the most you can get him to turn is like, you know, creating separation on end cuts and stuff like that. But like Tucker Kraft is like actually a guy like you can
Change
like
of
run
direction.
screens to him. Yeah, you can run screens to him and stuff. Hard nosed guy, absolute psycho. I mean, Packers fans love the kid. So yeah, everyone's pretty thumbs up on him right now.
I mean, have you seen his like headshot? He looks like a Packers fan.
Yeah, one of us. One of us. Have you heard the quote?
What quote?
All
right. Where'd you go? Where are you going?
I'm back. I had to find the quote. This is from Tucker Kraft. I'm comfortable with violence at the line of scrimmage. I want to punish defenders as a blocker. I see the emotions in their face change once I put them on their heels. I can feel their breath leaving. They exhale as I fall on top of them. So yeah, we're talking
NDSU.
Yeah, he's a psycho. We love him. I hope he catches 2 touchdown passes in this game.
Dude, I was saying like he looked like a Packers fan because he's white and he has an outdated haircut, but you know.
Well, the joke in Packers Twitter has been that Van Ness, him, and Luke Musgrave look like they're asking who you know at a frat party. Right? That was the rookie class this year outside of Jaden Reed at the top of the draft was just frat boys.
That's incredible and worrisome. All right. So you take a look at we haven't talked about the offensive line yet. That's important. Who's up and who's down on this offensive line? I don't know. I have no idea.
So they did a weird thing for a while where they were rotating Rasheed Walker and Josh Nijman at left tackle, and they were also rotating John Runyon Jr. and Sean Ryan at right guard. I think they're kind of
Sean Ryan, Wake Forest, right? No, UCLA.
Sean Ryan from UCLA. Yeah,
Zach Tom's Wake Forest.
Zach Tom's Wake Forest. He's starting at right tackle. Josh Myers is going to start at center. Elton Jenkins is going to start at left guard. I know he's on the injury report, but that's something that he's been dealing with all season and that he's been playing through. They usually give him a day off during the week. I think they're re-solidifying the offensive line to be, left to right, Walkers, Jenkins, Myers, Runyon Jr., and then Tom. I think that's what you're going to see. That's a fairly solid offensive line, I would say. Rasheed Walker, surprisingly, is getting graded out very well in terms of like pass blocking efficiency metrics. Not sure I fully buy that.
Okay,
not fully sure I buy into that. There are times where his feet are bad. He's not the best athlete in the world at left tackle. I kind of think the team is probably, if I were to guess today, going to spend a first-round pick on tackle, in the draft in April.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see about, hey, what is that Pandora's box with David Bakhtiari's photo on it? We'll have to figure out what that means. So, yeah, I mean, that's what you're going to get. I think it's probably, I would say, an above average line for pass protection at this point, but not what it's been, in the past. And as a run blocking team, I don't think that they're very good, but Aaron Jones kind of makes chicken salad out of chicken. So,
all right, well, I'm going to have to tell James to censor you there. It's a family show, Justice.
How dare I? Yeah.
Okay, so we learned a little bit about Walker. We all already know about Elton Jenkins. It feels like he's not playing as well as he did his rookie year. Still pretty good.
Jenkins?
Yeah, he's very good, but it felt like his rookie year, everyone was talking about how crazy he was.
Jenkins hasn't been playing as good this year. I think a lot of that is the fact that he's playing through injury. Not really super worried about him long term. I just think he's dealing with stuff. So.
And then John Runyon, I know that like mostly you've wanted Runyon to play because in previous years it was like Royce Newman who was like always confused. Yeah.
Yeah, big
but
big question mark pops up.
it's like a video game, like
Yeah,
ding, quest item. Uh, but like independent of like that comparison, when
right.
you compare Runyon to like other guards across the league, like what do you see?
Yeah, I think Runyon has progressively gotten worse over the last 3 years. I thought 2021 he was probably one of the more underrated offensive linemen around the league. Um,
Including by the Packers.
yeah, I guess you would have to include him there. Um, but now, I mean, I don't really see the push in the run game, and the fact that he has to line up next to Myers too, who the Packers continuously say, Josh Myers is having, the best season of his career, and I'm like, either that doesn't mean much, or I think you're lying, right? Like it's one of the two. He's not playing very well at center, and having those guys line up next to each other isn't the best thing. I think they kind of just have Myers there for continuity at the center position because he might be handling some of the protection stuff in Love's first year, as a guy under center.
Okay. And Zach Tom is a guy you've always kind of liked.
Yep, he'll struggle with length and strength, but that's kind of what comes with having a bookend who's like barely 6'4", barely, he's probably under a playing weight of 300 pounds at this point. So
super athlete though.
Yeah, super good athlete, really good pass protector, in terms of handling all that speed and stuff. But length and strength is what's going to get him a little bit. But thumbs up on him moving forward. I don't think they're going to shake anything up at right tackle anytime soon.
So, I mean, it sounds like the Packers would be in next year's draft be interested in a tackle, a center, and possibly a guard.
Correct.
Does it feel weird not having a good offensive line, or has like the injury problem over the last couple of years kind of blackpilled you on that?
No, I mean it is kind of weird. Because the Packers, when they do have like an average offensive line, you would think the sky is falling. We're like, I can't believe this. This must be like the league worst offense. And then you look up all the stats and you're like, actually, we're like league average. So maybe we should chill out a little bit. We'll see what happens next year. I mean, maybe they take a left tackle of the future who plays a different position momentarily because Bakhtiari still has 1 year left on his deal. I don't know.
Dude, I get asked this all the time, and mostly my examples are like the Cowboys do this a lot. But like, how often does this happen where you have somebody that you draft to play like left tackle long term, and in the short term he's playing like right tackle or left guard or whatever before that happens? Like, how often does that happen realistically in the NFL?
I don't know, but the Packers are weird in terms of their offensive line stuff, right? Like they'll bounce around guys, all sorts of spots. Elgton Jenkins played everywhere. Zach Tom's played everywhere.
Elgton Jenkins has played everywhere. Jesus.
Jon Runyan Jr. They had him, snap in the preseason. They had Sean Ryan snap in the preseason. They've been rotating in game Sean Ryan and Jon Runyan Jr. Like I said, and Josh Nijman, Rasheed Walker. I mean, those are things that don't usually happen at the NFL level either. I think they're a team that's fully invested in developing an offense, especially one that can pass well. So I could see them doing it for sure.
And when you take a look again at Brian Flores' defense that has been blitzing a lot less over the past 6 weeks, but still it's more than everybody else. But that's, we're dropping from like 60 to 50, I guess is the best way to put it. When you take a look at that kind of defense, when you take a look at a defense that like plays like a 4-person zone at the back end, that will play around with how many linebackers they have on the field, will have a penny front, will line up 5 to 7 guys on the line of scrimmage, rotate from 1 safety to 2 high. When you take a look at that, Flores defense, what do you think what impact will that have on the offensive line? What impact will that have on Jordan Love? And what impact will that have on the play calling? Because the Vikings have been seeing a lot of teams throw short in response. And then the teams that like don't kind of kick their ass a little bit.
Yeah. The Packers have been kind of decent at doing both of those things at this point. They kind of take what the defense gives you, but they'll also, load up and have chips on the field right? Guys in wing positions and empty, either a tight end or a running back, and take shots down the field too. The Packers have an extremely high A dot, especially before the last couple of weeks.
Which
and we're
would
just
explain the difference between like success rate and EPA for them. Too.
Right. Exactly. There was a point. I haven't kept up with the stats recently, but there was a point where Love was leading the league in terms of like deep attempts and stuff like that, and it wasn't particularly close. So I could see the Packers taking some deep shots. The question is just like, who are you throwing those to? Because Dobbs isn't a burner. Heath isn't a burner. Are you going to take shot plays to Samori Toure? He's probably your best opportunity to get a shot play off, depending on, who's in or who's out of the game. So I think that's where, the Watson, Reed, Wicks question really becomes important. And how do you game plan for that, right? Like, do you have two game plans for, if one of these guys is in or one of these guys is out? I don't know. I don't know how you handle that at the NFL level at this point, because I don't know if the Packers are sure who's going to play, and it's Wednesday or Thursday night.
I'm looking at attempt percentage, and I'm going to get rid of anybody who's played fewer than 7 games. So it's Will Levis, Tyrod Taylor, and then Jordan Love in attempt percentage, which Levis and Taylor have played 8 games.
For deep shots, so. Correct?
Yeah, for deep shot. Yeah, a deep shot attempt percentage. And then because Jordan Love has played 15 games, those guys have played 8. He still has the most total number, and of guys with 74. So guys with at least 55 deep passing attempts, he has the fewest total dropbacks. So his percentage is pretty high among everyday quarterbacks.
Yeah,
big time throw rate, really good on these plays.
You didn't believe me. I like Love.
Well, it's okay on these plays. Trevor Lawrence has a 10% high. Well, okay, so his is at 25%. Lawrence is at 36. Josh Allen's at 27. Baker's at 17. Okay. Good job, Joe Barry. Prescott's at 33. Carr's at 23. Sam Howell's at 30. Sam Howell is weird, doesn't count. Russell Wilson's at 28. Hey, it's a better big time throw rate on deep passing plays than Patrick Mahomes. So there you go. That's something.
There we go.
Not as good as the rest of these guys in the top 10, though.
If you say so.
All right, so you think like one-step drop back type 15-yard throws to get them open 20 against the blitz, that kind of stuff? I feel like they'll
max protect. They'll max protect and use chips and stuff like that too. I mean, they'll just run 3 routes and have 3 deep routes, and one of them's a route conversion, and expect Left to hit that thing.
I'm going to check real, because it felt like they didn't actually do that when you told me that they were going to do that last time.
Last game, again, this team is different than last time they played around.
but you were
and
like,
I told you that coming into it. I was like, this team is fucking weird and young right now.
But the thing you told me about them was that they would like throw deep, right? And they didn't.
Fair.
And now you're like, yeah, they love throwing deep.
They still love throwing deep.
But now they'll do it against blitzes, whereas before they wouldn't.
I need to know which receivers are in the game. If it's Amari Toure, probably not.
Okay.
He's probably going to get 2 of them, but that's it.
Do you think that they'll get that they'll get like yards after the catch with like a screen heavy game?
Yeah, I could see them doing that, or again, throwing glances or something like that to Dobbs or Heath. Those are kind of like the yak broken tackle type of guys, or guys that you want to get the ball versus off coverage and stuff like that. So I could see them doing stuff like that. Now screens on the backside of run plays, for example.
All right,
they're going to have to figure out ways to do it.
Love's ADOT against the Vikings blitzes was 4.7.
Ew.
Gross. Okay, what's the season long ADOT against blitzes though? That might tell me a little bit more.
You're the one with the stats. Yeah,
I'm looking. It's one of the lowest in the NFL at 7.4.
Uh-oh. Yeah, but you got to take out the Vikings.
Are you alive?
You got to take out the Vikings game. No, they're throwing deep shots.
Okay, I'll do it after week 7. How does that sound?
Yeah.
I don't appreciate it when you lie to me.
I don't lie to you. You already looked up the frequency of his deep shots. They're throwing deep shots.
Yeah, but not against the blitz. That's what I was saying. All right, after week 7, the ADOT against the blitz, where is he? Is 26th of 36 quarterbacks at 7.0.
We got to work on that, Matt.
You are unreliable. This is crazy.
Not true. I want those stats double checked for quality control purposes.
Okay, well, you do it then. You go through the last 6 weeks of blitzes.
Oh, every single one of the snaps.
Just the blitzes
For every team.
See, how many dropbacks against the blitzes he had? He's had the most. People love blitzing him. Holy shit. Okay, I'm gonna have to edit that out too. He has the highest since week 7. So after week 7, week 8 to week 16, he is the second most blitzed quarterback in the NFL after Bailey Zappi, who probably should not meet an attempt threshold here.
I do wonder how much of that has to do with the opponents faced. Because again,
if you've played both Martindale,
Bowles, Wink, and Spagnuolo, like we've seen it.
That's probably.
So, yeah.
But yeah, his yards per attempt on blitzes is like 7.3. It's like whatever, and his A.7.
Well, if Samori Toure is the only deep shot option, I feel pretty comfortable saying they're going to be checking this ball down.
Dude, his grade when not blitzed is 91, and when he is blitzed, it's 73. This is crazy. All right, well, I think I know what the Vikings are going to do. Thanks for coming, Justice.
Yeah, I have 2 questions for you.
Right. Okay,
on the way out.
Because you always steal this podcast.
How dare you? I'm giving you my time, and you accuse me as a stealer. I thought we were about collaboration.
We're not, and we hate each other.
Jaren Hall. Is there any hope that he's the guy? Like, what the hell's going on? So this is about to be the 4th quarterback the Vikings have started for multiple games this season.
Well, technically the second, but yes. Mullins was the 4th because Jaren Hall did start against Atlanta.
But Jaren Hall only started 1 game, not 2. I said multiple games.
Oh,
I had a weird qualifier.
That's actually interesting. Okay, yeah. So what's the question?
Is there any hope that you guys are like, Jaren Hall, yeah, he's the guy going into next year? Like, can we booby trap you?
Can we if the Packers play poorly enough, can they trick the Vikings into putting their faith into Jaren Hall? Yeah, I mean, they don't have anybody under contract next year, so I don't think so. I think that the Vikings would probably be looking. In Atlanta against what was ostensibly at the time a good defense. I think they were like 6th in EPA per play allowed. His 10 dropbacks looked pretty good. They were pretty good. Then he got concussed. The Vikings were excited about him. They did play him ahead of Dobbs for, I guess, a reason. The reason more likely is that Dobbs showed up 3 days
Dobbs
prior.
Just got there.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a reason.
Yeah, I think that's probably the real reason.
Dobbs is still asking, like, how you get to the quarterback room.
Yeah. He did not know how to get to the locker room after the game.
Is that real?
Yeah, his first home game, which was the Saints game, because it was at Atlanta, I think. But yeah, he didn't know. Look, well, because he was like learning the cadence on the sideline. It was all very storybook. I mean, the Vikings like Hall, but he didn't win the camp competition against Nick Mullins. That's got to mean something, right? And then after Dobbs turned into a pumpkin, they went to Nick Mullins, who had just recently returned from IR, which is the only reason that Hall was playing. And then they went to Mullins again, when they decided on a starter. So Hall is like actually their 3rd option, but Dobbs forced his way into the conversation, turning Hall into a 4th option. But Hall is their 3rd option. So I don't know that they're like overly in on this guy. They probably think they got more than their money's worth trying to develop a backup. I think that they're very happy with that. But I don't think that they're like convinced that this guy could become, I mean, I guess the Packers could change their minds. That's always on the table. But I do think that the Vikings will probably try to sign a starter or a bridge regardless. Like, I don't think they're going to go into a season thinking that this 5th round guy with like 3 games under his belt is going to be a long-term starter. They're not going to turn themselves into Sam Howell stands, right? Like, that's exactly what happened to Washington.
You said maybe sign a star. I mean, is re-signing Kirk completely off the table at this point?
I'm convinced they'll re-sign Kirk. Like the way that
Yay!
the way that O'Connell talked about it was like, oh, I've never heard a coach be this definitive about a player that's not under contract next year. Like he said stuff like, we will bring him back. When have you heard a coach say that about a player that like that's crazy? He's like, Kirk was in the middle of a career year, which that is true. Kirk was in the middle of a career year, having some of the best play we've ever seen out of him. It would be nuts not to bring. We're absolutely bringing him back. He will be coming back. That's a crazy thing to say when you turn down the agent's offer.
No, and I mean, not to get into this too much, but like you look at the quarterback market for this upcoming year.
Hey, Russ will be available.
Yeah, I guess Russ will be available. Who knows how much he's going to want in terms of the money and stuff like that. But I think there's really I guess 2.5 quarterbacks in this draft, depending on what you think of Jaden Daniels. But there's going to be teams like, Washington, New England,
the second round of the draft is going to be stacked with quarterbacks.
Dude, good luck. Penix and Bo Nix? No, dude.
Dude, you love 25-year-olds. 25-year-olds with like a history of injuries? Yeah, you love those guys.
How can you turn them down? This is the other thing I wanted to ask on the way out. Do you guys even really want to make the playoffs, or do you guys just want to keep us out? Because I think that's kind of where both of our teams are at this point.
I think there was like a post on the Vikings Reddit. So like I get notifications for like posts that blow up on the Vikings subreddit. And this one like blew up. There was like a post chastising people for cheering for the Packers this weekend. They were like, "Have you no soul? You always beat the Packers." And it was a very upvoted post. So that seems to be the general community consensus. Not that the Vikings subreddit is a very good barometer for the Vikings fandom in general, but I think that like they would much rather beat the Packers and miss the playoffs and hurt their draft position than allow the Packers to make the playoffs. Like I think that that's where they are. Though if the Vikings beat the Packers, they have a 1 in 4. They currently have a 1 in 4 chance to make the playoffs. If they beat the Packers, it goes to a 1 in 2 chance, I think. And then they beat the Lions, it goes to basically a 99% chance. So it's basically each of these games constitutes a change of about 50% in their odds. And so beating the Packers will move them to a 1 in 2 chance. So it's be a good game to win. But yeah, I think a lot of Vikings fans, their motivation is just like it would be so obnoxious if the Packers made the playoffs after all of this.
Yeah, that's the thing in Green Bay. It's like I don't think we're going to shock the world by any means. And every Packers fan's biggest worry right now is that Joe Barry somehow puts together some sort of 3-game stretch that saves, his tenure in Green Bay.
It would be so who are the Packers playing next?
Bears.
And
that might be Sunday Night Football. I mean, that could be winning in every NFC team is.
So Joe Barry gets to go up against a rookie 5th-round quarterback who is 3rd on his team's depth chart with 2 receivers potentially injured for the game, and then
Arif. We lost to Tommy DeVito. Baker had like 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, and then we almost lost to Bryce Young.
I'm just saying your fears are well founded, right?
Yes.
This is exactly the situation that someone can save their coordinating career, right? They sneak into the playoffs by beating the Justin Fields Bears and the Jaren Hall Vikings without their second receiver or starting tight end. Their starting tight end, who, by the way, is 40 yards away from hitting 1,000 yards this year, like was well on pace to hitting 1,000, like clearly their second receiver. This is exactly the scenario that saves Joe Barry. So I think Vikings fans would want probably a 54-40 game. No, the opposite. They would want a 13-10 game that would save Joe Barry's career. Yeah.
You want 3-0 and Matt after the game being like, I couldn't have done it without Joe.
I've already had 3-0, dude. I don't need that.
2-0.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
2-0. Joe Barry's defense actually scores more points than everyone else's offense combined.
It'll be 2-0 Vikings. That's what the Vikings fans want.
Sure.
Yeah, 2-0. No offensive points. We solved the Jaron Hall question, so people stop arguing about it. And Joe Barry gets to keep his job.
Arguing.
Look, man. You've seen a fan base when some rando goes off for 6 touchdowns, right? You saw what Matt Flynn
It's
did.
true. I have seen. Well, we never had those conversations with Matt Flynn,
Yeah.
but I have. Speaking of Seahawks, I have seen Seahawks fans argue about Geno or Drew Lock all week. So,
Oh God. Well, okay, but in defense of Drew Lock, his vibes are immaculate, so I can see why people stick up for him. But
fair.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, just when somebody like that, especially a rookie, just like goes off for like no reason, and you can't really expect it to continue. Fan bases are like in, and front offices are too. Again, Sam Howell, he had like 1 game last year, and they were like, that dude is our starter.
I don't know if we can use anything Washington does to project the rest of the NFL. They had Jack Del Rio coaching a defense until mid-season this year. So,
Dude, how was Jack Del Rio not implicated in an email scandal? That's wild to me.
yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
He's
Yes.
got to be like the number, like if you were going to put betting odds together for the next coach to get canceled for bigotry, he's up there, right?
100%.
Like, yeah.
Number 1 draft pick.
Number one
Generation.
draft pick. Generational pick.
You trade everything to get him.
All right. Now with that actionable slander out of the way, is there anything, did we talk about special teams? Do you care?
No, Keyshawn's going to return everything. That's about it.
Cool. And you got Daniel Carlson's brother out there disappointing his brother. Cool.
Oh, no, he's fun. He's fun.
That's fair. Cool. Give me a score prediction, and we'll be good.
2-0. 2-0. Packers win. Joe Barry's defense. We couldn't have done it without you, Joe. We did it, Joe.
We did it, Joe. All right. Thanks for coming in, Justice. I hope your day gets worse.
All right, and let's talk a bit about what happened against the Lions. The Vikings lost the Lions game, and it's hard to look at that game and have any other takeaway other than there were a few too many interceptions. A few too many
smidge.
interceptions.
A smidge.
A skosh, really.
Nick Mullins played a very aggressive form of football. He really embodied the spirit of Jameis on the field, let me be clear.
Between Jameis and Rex Grossman. These were like, this was absolutely like Unleash the Dragon style. And at least on 2 of the picks, the moment they went up in the air, I said aloud, "Oh, that's not coming down from a Viking's not coming down with that."
Right? Yeah, it was crazy, and it's like all 4 picks. Like, okay, yep. It's just like that's not like a situation where you're like, oh, that's like PFF wouldn't count that as an interceptable pass. It was just like you threw the heck out of those picks, man. You were like, someone's coming down with this one, and lo and behold. It was nuts. So he had, Nick Mullins had the 99th percentile average depth of target in this game, which I wrote in my piece recapping the game that in the last couple of years there's only been 1 player with a higher average depth of target, and I wish I could remember for sure. Obviously, I'm at a computer. I could look it up right now, but I won't. And I'm going to say that it was probably Jameis Winston because he comes up several times in this article as like the only reasonable person who's actually had a statistical comparison close to what Nick Mullins did, right? It's crazy, but also like there are, so in terms of players who have thrown for over 400 yards, right? Which might I remind you, he threw for over like 400 yards in this game on 36 attempts, not 50 attempts, right? 36 attempts, he threw over 400 yards. He averaged like 11.6 or something yards, but over 11 yards an attempt, 11.6 yards an attempt. And there have only been like 2 quarterbacks in the last 2 years that have thrown for over 400 and thrown 4 picks. And Jameis is one of them. I forget the other one. So it's like obvious, and it's not even that game where Jameis set like the recent ADOT record or anything like that. That was a different game. So there's like 2 Jameis games going around, and neither of them did the quarterbacks average over 8 yards an attempt. So like he threw the heck out of that ball, and like it got caught by somebody most of the, like a substantial majority of the time someone was coming down with it. Rarely hit the ground. And then like 2 times it did hit the ground, they were like drops, right? So somebody was putting their hand on the ball. And the crazy thing is, right, and I don't disagree with the decision to bench him, which we'll talk about in a bit. But on paper, his contributions were net positive. That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, right? Well, not ever. Let's be real. Not even probably this week. But you got to be kidding me, right? That's crazy that like from an EPA perspective, that the yardage that he gained, and the touchdowns he threw a pair of touchdowns, the yardage that he gained was worth essentially those interceptions in expected points, and that it produced more offensive production overall, more opportunities for points for the Vikings overall than it cost them. He was in the 64th percentile of EPA per play, and that's crazy. That's crazy. What? And like someone mentioned, like on the football party, I don't know if it was like Luke or Sam or whoever, but like every year that Nick Mullins has been in the league, he has gotten like wilder, right? It's like Robin Williams and Jumanji. It's like the NFL is changing him. And when he comes out of it, he'll be unrecognizable.
That's nuts. That is ridiculous. But at the same time, I haven't been that certain on a final pass from a Vikings quarterback that it was going to be picked since Dante Culpepper used to end games with, well, Randy's probably down there. Like, I haven't been that certain of a pick in a very long time.
It was crazy. And like you see the pick, and it's just like, sorry, I was just doing some sorting because Nick Mullins is having a crazy year, like obviously, and I came upon a statistical nugget that is extremely funny that I will share in a second. But that throw, first of all, I mean, like obviously just like fluttered out of his hand, like what? Why? There's no one hit him. The ball wasn't batted. The receiver didn't like suddenly change directions in a bad way because obviously Jefferson was running the route the correct way. It just fluttered, but it was also like headed the wrong direction. It was headed behind Jefferson. So like Jefferson is running like a post between 2 safeties or something, right? And he just throws it behind him. And instead you're supposed to throw it a little bit ahead, but mostly between, so that he could just come down with it between the 2 safeties. And ideally, you look off the far safety, right? So that he'll be even further away. But like, you just threw it like behind him, like and low and slow, and he just undercut it and took it. It was just, the guy is open. Like, I know he doesn't necessarily seem open because there's 2 defenders near him, but he's open. There's a throw that gets it there. And like, I've been bagging on Kirk Cousins a lot, but I've also been saying he's had a great year this year. I think that the worst Kirk Cousins year in a Vikings uniform, I can't attest to him in Washington, would hit that throw. Like, that's the throw. I don't know how else to put it. That's crazy. Yeah, that was 100% a pick. And the Jordan Addison outside throw, that Kirby Joseph, that the commentators are like, yeah, Kirby Joseph baited him into that throw. No, he didn't. He was out of position. It was in a bad spot. That's a touchdown throw. It should be. And instead of throwing it above and away, he throws it like underneath and short. Like, all of these are just like, what are you doing, man? I'm astounded. And on paper, he was a net positive. And okay, so Nick Mullins has had 99 action plays, so dropbacks plus scrambles, right? And if you look for all quarterbacks with 99 or more plays, right? Dropbacks or scrambles, Mullins, when you combine EPA per play and completion percentage over expected, Mullins ranks 2nd in the NFL, behind Brock Purdy and above Tua and Josh Allen and Dak Prescott. That's the order. Brock Purdy, Nick Mullins, Tua Tagovailoa, Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, and then, of course, Like, obviously, just to twist the knife, Kirk Cousins is next.
Yeah, of course. That's
yeah,
the
like, why
only way
wouldn't
that
it be?
works.
Yeah. Now, a lot of that is built on completion percentage over expected, which, by the way, that formula is like built on like passes further down the field being like much more difficult to complete, like that, which is intuitive, right? And so him just spamming like I'll go special or whatever, right, has resulted in him maybe breaking CPOE, because he is the highest CPOE in the NFL by an insane margin, right? So over the course of a year, and mind you, I'm all quarterbacks with 99 or more attempts, right? So there's like low sample guys with 100 in here, 114, 130, like all of those guys. So on a high volume, high quality quarterback that is making a lot of completions over expected, they generate about 5% more, which is that, or 5 percentage points more, I should say, which is those are just the margins in the NFL. Those small percentages make a big difference. So like Tagovailoa is at 5.4, Jake Browning's at 5.1, Brock Purdy's at 4.9, Josh Allen is at 4.7. These are the people leading the league in the metric, right? And mind you, this is the running backs don't matter metric. The next gen stats metric for completion percentage over expected is much more precise in ways that account for a lot of other elements that this one can't, because it's just using air yards and relative ball location. So they include things like whether or not there's pressure, whether or not a defender is nearby, the distance to the sideline, the true distance in the air versus just the scrimmage distance. And a couple of other factors, right? And this one doesn't. So you keep that in mind. So 5.4, 5.1, 4.9, 4.7, right? Those lead the league. And again, Kirk Cousins is next at 4.3, because of course he is. Nick Mullins' CPOE is 10.5. Is the distance between first and second, Nick Mullins in first and Tagovailoa in second, is 5 percentage points, which is the difference between Tagovailoa in second and Jordan Love at 23rd. Like,
how is that a thing?
I don't know. I don't know, James. I don't know, James. This is stupid. This numbers they don't number. What do I do?
I don't know how to pivot from that. They didn't teach me this in podcasting school. How do you pivot from one of the dumbest stats I've ever heard?
And this is like, so this includes like the Raiders game where he miraculously scored 3 points, or put the Vikings in position to score 3 points. Not giving him credit for what Greg Joseph did. But like, and also, Joseph missed the one that would have kept Dobbs in the game. But the thing is, these statistics tend to correlate relatively well with PFF grade, right? Like one would imagine, right? That makes sense. Nick Mullins had the third lowest PFF grade of all 38 quarterbacks who took at least one drop back of the week. Like, yep. He had 7 turnover-worthy plays in the game. That means 3 of the picks he threw weren't caught. Like,
oh yeah, no, that's exactly what happened. I sat there with my son, going, "Yep, now you see where he put the ball? That's not where a starting quarterback would put that." There was a lot of that.
So, back when I was doing like national stuff on a more consistent basis for Pro Football Network, I would, when I was trying to like do quarterback rankings, one of the ways that I would, because I had like a lot of stuff, right? I would look at like what Nate Tice and JT O'Sullivan and Derek Clausen were doing. I'd watch the games themselves, of course. I'd look at Pro Football Reference and Running Backs Don't Matter, and I'd look at PFF. But one of the things I would do when kind of sorting through all these statistics was that I would combine big time throws plus turnover worthy plays for a volatility score. So having more wouldn't necessarily be better. Having less wouldn't necessarily be worse, although it's probably not a good thing to have a low volatility score. It was just like a stylistic thing so that when I write things up, I'd have something to go to, right? And of course, obviously, when I was doing this, the few times Jameis played, he was killing it in this score, right? And then sometimes I would add depth of target to it to really maximize it. Nick Mullins threw 3 big-time throws and 7 turnover-worthy plays for 10, I would say maybe dynamic throws or volatile throws. Out of 36 attempts, 1 out of every 3.6 throws was doing something huge in that game. That's nuts.
You can't say it was a boring game. You cannot say that he was a boring quarterback.
By no means was it a boring game. The most that anybody that had that week besides Mullins was 5. They were Jake Browning. They were all turnover-worthy plays. Good job, dude. But it was on 42 attempts. 10 over 36 or 5 over 42. Those are your comparisons. This guy is crazy. He's crazy. That's why he got benched.
So I guess before we get into the rest of the game, I guess I have to ask: are you okay with Jaren Hall starting this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know jack about Jaren Hall, right? I don't know anything. I watched the college stuff and I watched the preseason stuff, and that's fine. But obviously, we just don't know, right? I will say that his preseason stuff was better than Kellen Mond's, right? Which is nice. But also, what do I know about preseason football? I thought that Kyle Sloter looked okay in preseason. Then the guy gets cut. And then you talk to some former quarterbacks and they're like, yeah, the guy had no idea what he was looking at. I was just I thought he kind of, I'm wrong, I guess, but I thought he kind of did. And then they would break it down for me. And it's oh, he definitely did. Oh my gosh, thank you for explaining that. I'm never going to be able to apply that to a different player in my life. It's just, I'm not a learner, it turns out. So, the ability for Jaren Hall to go through, and I've learned a little bit about how progressions work and stuff like that. But the ability of Jaren Hall to execute in the preseason, pretty difficult to break down. His 10 dropbacks or whatever against Atlanta, that's probably generous, probably not even 10. Probably didn't give us much of a win. They look great, by the way. He was insane good against Atlanta. It kind of got lost when Joshua Dobbs started playing in the second half. Obviously in the first half, you're oh man, this is a disaster. If only Jaren Hall didn't get hurt. In the second half, you're Jaren who? I've never heard of that guy in my life. But he played well, but he was third on the depth chart for a reason, right? The issue is that I'm relying on a heuristic that is no longer all that useful for 2 reasons. The first reason is that the same people who watched Jaren Hall and made him the third stringer have now decided, based off of watching Jaren Hall and Nick Mullins, that Jaren Hall is probably giving them the better chance to win. So how can I rely on the judgment that he was a third string quarterback if the same people who made that judgment are now making the judgment that he's a second string quarterback? So that's a problem. The second problem with this, of course, is Ty Chandler. I used this argument to say that maybe we're being a little bit too optimistic about Ty Chandler. Not to say he had a great game against the Lions, right? What do the Vikings have, 16 total rushing yards? But it seems pretty evident based off of what we've seen that Chandler is worth playing ahead of Alexander Madison. So maybe the coaching staff was potentially wrong there, right? But we also know it's a pretty good coaching staff for the most part. So I don't want to, I don't want to go too hard on that, but I do think that it is relevant that Hall was the last possible option here, besides Dobbs, of course, right? And Dobbs would have never played if Hall didn't get hurt. So, that's not a big part of it or anything like that. But it does seem relevant, right? That the coaching staff watched him in training camp and decided, I don't know, man. And then, benched Dobbs with Mullins instead of benching Dobbs with Hall when Mullins was healthy, right? It seems like that's an important part of our consideration. So I am a little bit concerned. I am curious. I don't think Jaren Hall is likely going to be all that great, but I didn't think that Nick Mullins would play like this. I didn't think Joshua Dobbs would ever play well. When he did play poorly, at least that one I did expect. I did see coming, so I'll take that W, I guess. But for what that one's worth. But it's tough when you have a quarterback with relatively low information, and the indicators that you have that give you that kind of information are either a little bit unreliable or have essentially changed their judgment. So that one is kind of tough. But yeah, I mean, you can't throw 4 turnovers on 36 attempts, or I guess 7 really on 36 attempts. That's nutso stuff. Like that's like we were on the verge of a Nathan Peterman game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like 5 in the first half and benched is like kind of where we were at.
Almost went full Delhomme.
Almost went full Delhomme. So yeah, you kind of have to, because the big plays won't probably repeat themselves in the same way, but the poor plays probably will. And so despite the fact that the on-paper impact of Nick Mullins was, I guess, positive, the game ended on a pick, so I don't feel confident saying that I trust the numbers on this one, but, I guess positive. It's that the traits that kind of help us predict stuff going forward, whether that's numerical traits like success, well, his success rate was surprisingly high too, but numerical traits like, turnover worthy play percentage and stuff like that, those traits tell us probably he's not. So yeah, I guess to me, the answer is they had to make a move. That does not mean that Jaren Hall is very good. It just means he's not Kellen Mond, right? When Kellen Mond when Sean Mannion was struggling and Kellen Mond was there and Mike Zimmer was like, I'm good, that sent us all kinds of signals that turned out to be true. Like, holy crap. And they're not sending that signal with Hall. That's a good sign. But that doesn't mean a ton, right? This is at least not like a Drew Samia scenario where everybody's been calling for him to get the start and the coaches keep on not doing it. And then a bunch of people get hurt and then he plays and you're like, oh, I get it. Okay, that you were right. I'm sorry. This is like one where they chose to bench Mullins. So they think that Hall can play better than what we've seen from Mullins the past couple of games. That's what they're essentially saying. And that's a stronger signal. So I guess I agree with it. I just don't feel like that there's too much to work with here.
Yeah. This was let's go back to the game here. In addition to Jefferson just balling out and just bringing in just about every ball that was even remotely catchable and clearly beating himself up in the process. Like that one where he landed on his back, just there's no part of him that could have felt good after that. Yeah. This also turned into a MASH tent game with all of the injuries. Not just Hawkinson went down, but Hawkinson's out for the rest of the year. This isn't good, and this is not exactly the way you wanted the season to end.
Yeah, the Vikings ended up with a couple of injuries in the game. Offensively, in addition to Hawkinson, you had Jordan Addison go down. That's a problem. Jalen Naylor sustained a concussion in the game. That's a problem. Obviously, Alexander Mattison wasn't ready to go, so it wasn't really in the game or anything like that. But that is an issue, right? Same with Brian O'Neill. But defensively, we saw a lot of injuries, right? We saw Mekhi Blackman got a shoulder. Byron Murphy got a knee. Caleb Evans was bad. I don't know. It doesn't really count as an injury. But, it seemed relevant because they played
It's an issue.
It's an issue, right?
It's certainly an issue. It's not surgical.
It tested the depth because they benched him, right?
Yeah.
They were like, all right, Jalen Williams, you go out there. A practice squad guy they elevated for that game. Theo Jackson, you can play corner, right? And it's, no, he can't. But you can play safety while one of the safeties plays corner, I guess. Lot of injuries in that game, and obviously they're relevant. 2 injuries heading into the game. Harrison Phillips showed up on the injury report with a back. I don't remember that occurring during the game. I think Troy Dye might have left during the game. I don't recall, but he's on the injury report. Sheldon Day, I don't think left during the game. He's on the injury. Might have actually. He's on the injury report. A lot going on. A huge number of injuries in that game, which really impacted things from receiving and coverage perspective, which aside from the quarterback, which we know he's in there because of injury already, right? Those are the two most important elements, at least statistically, in a game. Your ability to catch the ball and your ability to prevent catches. Like, that's the deal. And the Vikings had their depth tested to a pretty severe degree in that respect on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it was ugly. It was not, from a certain standpoint, you just wanted everyone to just be done. Like,
yeah,
if,
just
if
like
we're
take
gonna,
the L and go home, and then we'll like take the extra quarter of not being up as recovery.
Yeah, I mean, look, I watched the end of the Jets Browns game. The Jets receiver, I believe it was a receiver, just like he gave himself up, went to the ground, fine. A Browns player like got hurt on that play, and you're just like, really? He gave himself up. Like, that's the play that you get like really hurt on, or your shoulder gets messed up on. The play where he clearly just was done. Like, I was like, I don't even know like how.
That's nuts, man.
It just the whole game felt like that. I was like, all right, well, the Lions are going to win their first title since, finally they have one of the North since the
right. Yeah, it was
rip.
The last time they won a title, it was the Central.
Yeah, rip the joke about the Bucks winning a division title before them. Yeah. It's an unfortunate thing. That was one of the better like memes, one of the better like running jokes for 30 years. Darn shame. But this game wasn't like great to watch. The defense kept going down. Goff was able to move the ball down the field. At one point, I wanted to say aloud that like I thought the Vikings defense was going to be able to handle this, and then I remembered we didn't have anybody out there playing defense anymore because they were all hurt.
Yeah, that creates some problems,
as it turns out.
Yeah,
when you run out of corners.
Yeah, like even this Brian Flores defense, which has been like making this defense full of like essentially like bridge starters, right? And I don't want to like disrespect Jordan Hicks too much because he's actually been playing well when he's on the field, but it's like a bunch of people that are signed until you can find something, right? Until you sign a star at the position or until you draft a player at that position. Those players are essentially transients, right? And it's like a defense like full of them. And it's not like that's how the Vikings acquired all of them, because like Pat Jones, I would characterize that way, who had a great game, incidentally. So maybe an unfair game to bring up. This is how I would describe Pat Jones. But like DJ Wanham is like, yeah, that's a spot starter. Pat Jones, yeah, that's a rotational rusher until you can get like a rookie year developing, right? It's like a defense full of those guys, right? Caleb Evans might turn into a pretty good cornerback too, but right now he's like a guy. And he's not the worst corner in the league by any stretch of the imagination among the starters. But he's a guy where if somebody drafted a cornerback in the first round, you'd be like, okay, yeah, I get it, right? The defense is full of that. And so we're just like, Brian Flores is turning this defense full of journeymen into like studs, right? It's like Danielle Hunter and that's it, right? Harrison Smith is making some like highlight appearances. And he's like, yeah, this safety that you've never heard of that we're signing to like a 2-year, $6 million extension, he's going to be the straw that stirs the drink. He's going to be crucial. This undrafted linebacker from Cincinnati, he's going to displace the the third rounder from last year, who, by the way, they were so confident was going to start, they were holding individual pressers for him in the summer and talking him up alone, unprompted. Right. And they're like, this guy is so smart. He gets to the ball so fast. He understands everything. And it's like, that guy, actually, screw that guy. We're going to play the 5'10 undrafted linebacker from Cincinnati instead. And not the Bengals, the University of Cincinnati, the Bearcats. Right. Like, okay, sure. And he's playing excellently, I guess. Right. We're going to sign a guy who hasn't been on the team in 3 years or 2 years in Anthony Barr. Great. He's going to play a little bit. The defense is full of these guys, and they were killing people. And it turns out there's like a limit to that. Like, it turns out like those guys are still more talented than their backups. And those backups are going to get roasted. It's not going to look good. And it didn't. Whoops.
Yeah. Eventually, all things end. And we're kind of at that point with the team, with the season. And there's a lot of frustration online. There's a lot of frustration with people who watch the Vikings, who bought into the whole, hey, we're gonna, Josh Dobbs made us a playoff team, winning the games after Kirk got hurt, with Jefferson out. This is good. This is the reality that I was prepared for. This is the reality that we should just get to know.
Yeah, we were borrowing time against this realization. That's what was happening.
Right? One of the episode titles was literally Playing with House Money. Like, this is what we had. It was a fun run, but like, it wasn't going to substantiate into something like huge. Eventually, the clock is going to hit midnight, and this is the team that you have.
And this is going to be a situation where you're going to like tell people 20 years from now, hey, you have no idea how good this team could have been. Oh man,
yeah,
right? Like it's like the 2023 Vikings could have won the Super Bowl. Man, it's just the quarterback got hurt.
Yep.
Like, all right, Grandpa, whatever you say, it's like, no, listen, sit down and listen.
We're gonna pull up whatever the version of YouTube is now, and we're gonna put on our VR helmets, and we're gonna figure this out. And thanks to the We're gonna put on our Zuckerbergs, and we're gonna get this taken care of. You're gonna see just how good this team really was. It's basically going to be like the whole when Dante got hurt. Like, man, when Dante got hurt, oh boy.
Or like when Teddy got hurt, like you don't
oh
understand.
man, that preseason he was
that
so good.
2016 preseason. Let me throw on that Chargers game again for you.
Oh, it was gorgeous. He was everything a quarterback was supposed to be. His legs were moving in the direction they were supposed to be.
He was
they were all
hitting
together.
all his deep passes. The ball had velocity. You don't understand. It's like, Grandpa, Teddy played for like 7 more years after that. You don't understand.
You don't get it. You don't get it. Or
that's what the season's going to be. And that's fine. We can log it that way.
Other teams have this. It's not that often that the Vikings have a quarterback with a season-ending injury.
The Jets are having it right now, too. Right?
Yeah.
If Aaron Rodgers is bad next year, all of us are just going to be like, yeah, it's probably because of that Achilles. That's a killer, right? That's, but yeah, he played real well. He was coming off an MVP season, and those 4 plays, they were real good. Real good. You should have seen him in camp. Hey, let me throw on Hard Knocks. This guy was crazy. Look, he's playing against the best defense in the NFL. Shut up. It's the best defense in the NFL. This guy is astounding them. The best defense in the NFL is like, we can't beat this guy. You don't understand. The Jets are having the season right now. The Vikings are having the season right now. And it's just like, these things just gotta happen, man.
Yeah.
I know Colts fans sometimes still talk about like Burt Jones, which is crazy. That dude had 8 games in his career. Like at least they talk about Andrew Luck, and you're like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
a house fell on him. I get it. But like,
you kind of have to just accept and move on. Like, the season's lost. This was never going to be a team that, outside of maybe beating the Lions in the wild card, that was going to end up turning into anything. Like, it
dude,
sucks.
Not if the quarterback went down. Yeah, it's just it.
Yeah.
Like Jim said, we're playing with house money. Fans kind of have to understand that like your backup is a backup for a reason, and they're often not the 33rd best player at the position in the NFL. They're often like, if you're lucky, 40th, right? Because if you're 40th, in theory, you're like the 8th best backup in like a perfect market where all 32 starters are the best 32 players, which not always the case. But like 40th is like pretty lucky. That's bad. 40th is bad. And that's if you're lucky. The Vikings are now playing around with, are we 55th? 60th? That's what we're playing around with right now.
Just sign Case Cookus and call it good. Like, that's the next logical
just sign
step.
Case Cookus. We got one more game to hit 5, and Ty, from the best I can tell, is the record for most NFL starters in a season.
The fact that Flacco is turning into a miracle man in Cleveland right now is amazing, and dude, I can't
I'm here for it.
Wait for that to hit midnight too. Like, that's coming.
Dude, he can't either, man. He fell asleep on the sideline.
It was so great.
A top 2 defense in the NFL, and he's like, man, I'm tired.
Not since Goodell falling asleep in his chair during the draft have I gone, that dude's asleep.
Yeah, right. It's like, and like, at least during the draft, Goodell is like, he gets up, he reads a name, he sits down in this absurdly comfortable looking chair. Like, okay, I get it. But this dude is getting like hit, Right?
Yep.
Like Quinnen Williams is lighting this dude up. He is like throwing the ball, like he's throwing the ball with velocity, right? He is like whipping it to like Jerome Ford, I guess, right? Like just like, okay, yeah, sure, man. Elijah Moore when he's healthy, like he's like physical activity and pain, and he's like, man, I have 5 kids, man.
I'm 39 years old.
Yeah, I gotta look. I'm good.
I can't. I appreciate you offering me coffee, but I want to be able to sleep tonight. So no, I can't have the coffee.
Yeah.
You know, he's the guy turning down the smelling salts from that the corners are all inhaling.
You're right. Yeah, he's like, look, I gotta watch this. That stuff screws me up 3 days later. Okay, no, you're fine. I'm just 39.
Yeah,
okay, so
that's actually, boy, as somebody who just turned 40, yeah, that's exactly how I feel a lot of the time. You'll be fine. I'm 40. I'm good. I've accepted what's coming. So no. There's not much more to really talk about for the Vikings game. Justin Jefferson went crazy. There are a couple of nice plays. A number of Vikings got injured. Is there anything else we need to touch on here? Kudos to the Lions for winning.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions played well. Super quick, just like we talked about players who played poorly. I do want to like shout out, first of all, we did talk about Justin Jefferson, but like super quick shout out to KJ Osborne, who we've been bagging on all season. I mean, justifiably, in fairness. But like he had the game of his life. Good job, dude. Also, Pat Jones, great. I've been waiting for this guy to like surpass DJ Wonnum on the depth chart. So happy for him to get closer to that reality. And then besides, I mean, Danielle Hunter, I thought had a pretty good game. Dude, Andrew Booth Jr. was like out there, I guess, and I didn't get mad at him. That's really good, right? Yeah, so like there are players who had good games that we didn't talk about. It's harder to talk about it when the game ends after 400 yards of passing with a 4th pick to seal it. Like it's a tough. Yep.
It's just another Christmas Eve for Minnesota Vikings fans.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to the mailbag. And the big story over the last couple of days involved the Russell Wilson situation over in Denver. Luke Braun's dad asks, can you explain the Denver Broncos situation to me like I'm 5?
Okay, well, I don't know what 5-year-olds are watching right now, but when I was 5, I assume, I watched Power Rangers a lot. So this is like when Rita Repulsa takes over the community center, right? It's like they all hung out at a community center, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
And the green... No, he started out as the White Ranger before he was the Green Ranger, right?
No, he started as... No, he was the White Ranger.
Yeah. Which, by the way, rips. He died like last year, I think.
No, sorry, he started as the Green Ranger. He started as the Green Ranger.
Okay. And the Green Ranger...
I didn't even watch this show. Vic had it on in the background. Vic had it on. It was always on in the background whenever.
Look, the chronology of when he was green and when he was...
He started green because there was a green candle.
Okay. So the Green Ranger starts out evil, and it turns out it's because of Rita Repulsa and Lord Zed, right? And eventually he becomes good, and then he just kind of like pieces out, and that's Russell Wilson. Rita Repulsa is Sean Payton. I think that was pretty obvious, actually. Yeah. It wasn't working out. He was evil. He was hurting everybody that it turns out he cared about. And then he saw the light, did pretty well for a while, and then just kind of bounced. And that's also Rita Repulsa's fault, it turns out. So that's the Denver Broncos. Also, Cortland Sutton is Rocky, the Red Ranger.
So why would the Broncos agree to a contract, sign everything for like the extension, and then a couple weeks ago tell Russell Wilson, hey, you need to waive this clause specifically, or we're going to bench you for the rest of the year. Like, at some point, this had to have, like, come up before.
Oh, that's Bulk and Skull's fault.
Stop equating this to Power Rangers for a moment, and let's actually explain this.
The question asked
to the
me
25
explain like
to
I'm
30.
5.
I don't care. To anybody, the adults that are 25 to 45 that listen to this show who are not
But
as...
they want serious Denver Broncos analysis now in the mailbag.
Look, if I have to get Dusty on here, I will, but I don't think he's awake right now. Well, he's not in my home, because I'm not going to get him there, but...
Wait, you don't consider the basement part of your home?
I don't have a basement in my home. The point of all of this is that the Broncos had a contract. They negotiated. They were a part of it. Everything. Extended Russell Wilson, and then came back like a year and some change later. Like, you need to waive that, or we're going to end up having to we're gonna have to bench you. Like, that's absurd.
Well, it is two different-ish regimes, right? Like, the first one is Nathaniel Hackett, Bulk and Skull in this analogy. And the second one, Sean Payton, right? And so Sean Payton just kind of has to deal with what Nathaniel Hackett asked George Payton to do. Just, funny because they've, like, now sunk multiple first-round picks into this pairing. But, like, that, so they put that deal together. So now they want to cut Russell Wilson and take on that dead cap. The problem is, like, if he gets injured in the final 2 games, then that injury guarantee, like, kicks in, and cutting him becomes really difficult for 2 reasons. One, because the injury guarantee, it increases the cap charge. But second, because then you have to go through an injury settlement, essentially. Instead of, like, being able to get rid of him, you have to, like, put him on IR, right? That's, like, the rule, unless you agree to an injury settlement with the player, in which case the player has to agree to take on a certain amount of money to walk away, and that money is prorated against how long the player, or in this case the player's agent, really thinks they'll be out. And so often they'll seek, like, a second. It's a whole process, right? And then when that player signs on with a new team, that injury settlement comes into play again. The difference between how long it took for them to actually sign with the team and get cleared versus how long was projected in the arrangement, that has to get balanced out too. So it's a hassle. You pay more money, you have a higher cap charge, and you can't necessarily just get rid of the player right away. There's a second negotiation that has to take place. So they wanted to avoid the possibility of injury so they could just cut him cleanly. And that was one reason they wanted to remove the injury guarantee, because a cut like that is just less clean, right? And so, that was why. And as to why they wanted to cut him, Sean Payton just wanted to select his guy, I guess. Russ had a couple of really great games. That's it.
Yeah. My question about the whole thing is whether or not this happened in Sean Payton's office, or whether or not this happened in Russell Wilson's office, because apparently he had an office in the building.
Why are we giving quarterbacks offices? Why? It's only the most, like, CEO-brained quarterbacks that ask for one, right? Right? Like,
yeah.
It's like Cam Newton's not asking for one. I don't think Tom Brady's asking for one. But Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson definitely are, right? And they think they're CEOs. Tom Brady might be, like, a cool, calm and collected, and he plays everything by the book, but he doesn't think he's, like, a CEO. He thinks he's a quarterback. Right?
He actually still thinks he's a quarterback, like, waking up in the morning.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Vikings might sign him to play Week 18. Like,
at this point, why not?
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, I hope it happened in Russ's office, but I imagine it happened in Sean Payton's office. Also, like, Russ knew he was going to get cut, like, I guess, like 2 months ago or something, right? So I guess that's when that conversation happened. And then he started playing well, which that has, like, kind of some, like, Aaron Rodgers. Okay, well, F you now. I'm going to play good.
Yeah, there's something going on there. Like, I've been dragging butt for, for a year and year and some change. I suppose I have to be good now since I know I'm going to be leaving.
Yeah, so, which means that, he'll probably sign somewhere. So I'm glad that he played some ticked off football. Because you could be like, well, season 1, that doesn't count. That's Nathaniel Hackett. He's fake. Season 2, hey, in the middle there was something good there, but he was a lame duck, and so like it's pretty difficult to work in an environment where like leadership has been robbed of you.
Yeah.
You can like make some excuses, plus you have some good play to point to that'll allow him to get a contract, maybe not like a $50 million contract or anything like that, which is kind of what the high end of quarterback contracts I imagine will be because of the increasing cap environment. But it's like probably a reasonable chunk of change that he was able to earn in the 5 or 6 games he was playing well.
Yeah. Shub asks, you are stuck on an island and you have to spend 15 days listening to one person talk to you about their thoughts and beliefs. Your options are Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. Who do you pick and why?
It's that TikTok going around of that guy just saying no. That's me.
That's you right now.
Yeah. No, don't.
So something went viral. Something went viral today. That we could also mention here. There was the rant from I believe it was First Take. It might have been something slightly different.
The Nick Wright rant.
Yeah, yep, the Nick Wright rant, where he declared that Aaron Rodgers is the most disingenuous athlete of our time. Is that accurate? I came up with a couple of ideas outside of that, but like
when he said that, I was like, do any names off the top of my head meaningfully counteract this? And no. And so I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to contest this. I'm good. But if you actually came up with like some genuine, disingenuous quarterbacks or players, not quarterbacks, athletes, I would love to contrast and compare.
Because there were a couple that had come up, including Jose Canseco, which that you could make an argument. Herschel Walker was one.
Oh yeah,
and that's
first of all, he wouldn't be of our generation. I don't think
that's a little bit outside of. I think that's a little bit outside of. The exact quote was of my lifetime, I believe.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like a current generation of athletes.
Yeah,
of my lifetime. Well, yeah, Nick Wright is as old as us, right? Maybe older.
Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting. I was like that. Yeah. Sammy Sosa when he and Big Papi when they forgot how to speak English. When they were confronted.
But that's like kind of funny.
So wait, if Aaron Rodgers was more funny than this Grant.
100. Are you kidding me? 100%.
He's absolutely just Joaquin Phoenix, just powering through this, going, when they know this is a joke, this is going to be so funny. He is absolutely method acting all of this. It's going to be the world's greatest comedy.
When Tom Brady was like confronted about like the MAGA hat in his locker, he felt pretty disingenuous, and like overall his statements of that era of the Patriots felt kind of disingenuous. But like he got pretty real with the Bucs, so I think he's bought a lot of that back. Especially now that he's no longer with the Bucs and he's just like, athletes today are soft. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty genuine.
Yeah. Brett Favre and Alex Rodriguez were the other two that were interesting.
Oh well, A-Rod easily, right?
Yeah, A-Rod and Aaron Rodgers. That's an interesting pairing there. Yeah, we'll ignore that, but
but like Brett Favre, it just feels like for like 4 or 5 years of his was like that, but the rest was fairly genuine seeming, right? So it's just like 4 or 5 years, like 2-3 years with the Packers, the year with the Jets, the year with the Vikings was pretty disingenuous, or I guess 2 years with the Vikings. I forget that there was 2. Famously very disingenuous after his playing career, but I don't know. That one's like, I guess it wouldn't be fair to do that and then also say Rodgers, because it didn't feel like Rodgers was disingenuous for like the first 5-6 years of his career, and now we're judging him like so maybe Favre actually does deserve to be in this conversation.
I think Favre deserves to definitely be a part of this. I
would still put Rodriguez and Rodgers above, but like Favre's got a puncher's chance.
There's a tiered list here. The S tier would include them and probably Herschel Walker, maybe. Like, that's pretty good. That's some pretty good company. After that, you can there's some.
And levels. I would love to hear like from other sports, like, does Chael Sonnen count? I don't know. I just know people hate him.
Oh, that's good, actually. That's very good.
Okay, great. I'm glad I just stumbled into one.
I could definitely see that. I could definitely see an argument for that, especially when he was doing the whole I'm clean, just and then immediately like test positive for
it tested hot.
steroids.
Yeah.
He had some interview about his fight with John Jones, and he's like, "Yeah, I got pushed into a corner and went, oh, he's on the same gas I am." And I was like, "Come on, dude."
Jesus.
Come on.
Jesus. Okay, yeah. So he seems pretty hateable. Well, I guess his whole bit is that he's hateable, but also he does seem disingenuous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like there's some other sports that like we're just not as familiar with that we could bring in that'd be pretty useful here. But like I'm struggling because it's like that I named that one because he's like famously hateable, and I'm not a huge MMA guy, but like that one stood out.
Yeah.
Is there like a badminton villain that we could?
I mean,
some like cricket guys.
I hate the fact that I know a number of cricket names, but they're less about it's less about being disingenuous and more about being like murderous people. So yeah, there's
okay. Well, I'm not gonna probe into that.
Yeah,
gymnastics people, is that? It feels like that one's rife for it.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you could also go the whole not Kerrigan, but you'd go like the Tanya Harding angle and all that. But
yeah, if we're doing Lifetime, yeah, Tanya Harding for sure.
Yeah.
And if we include coaches, you'd have to include like Kim Mulkey, right? The LSU women's basketball coach.
You'd include her. You'd include the Razorbacks coach with the busted
Petrino, Bobby.
Yeah, with Bobby Petrino. The one with the
he's back, right?
He's
back.
He's always in some way, shape, or form on that motorcycle with the woman he was cheating on his wife with.
Spiritually on the motorcycle.
Spiritually on that motorcycle. Let's go to Screenshot QB, who asks, Russell Wilson on a $25 to $30 million a year contract, or next year's first and another first for Kyler Murray. Which would you prefer for next year, Arif?
Okay, just real quick, I realized I didn't answer the Shub's question. The answer 100% is Russell Wilson and not Aaron Rodgers, because he'll say some corny stuff and I can roll my eyes and ignore it. And Aaron Rodgers will say something it's going to tick me off so much I feel compelled to answer it. Okay, so this question about, and that's work. Like I know when I get into self-destructive argument spirals. Okay,
yeah.
Okay, so at least it's only 15 days. So Russell Wilson, $25-30 million a year next year. Don't have to give up any firsts. Or next year's first and another first. So I assume 2024 first and 2025 first for Kyler Murray. Which would you prefer? I am not like super bought into Murray being all that great. I would imagine he would thrive much more in this environment than in Arizona's environment. Kind of like Dobbs, but like a guy that you could think is good. I would rather Russell Wilson and just treat him like a bridge quarterback, right? And then you can draft a guy in the first round and Russell Wilson is just going to start ahead of him. It's fine, right? Or a guy in the second round, and you could turn your first rounder into like a cornerback or an edge rusher. It feels like those are the two like most likely potential options for the Vikings. And so I think that is probably preferable than Kyler, because I've just not bought into Kyler being a franchise type quarterback. And so I would like for somebody to be, I think at a glance, a first round quarterback has a pretty decent shot of being as quality a quarterback as Kyler Murray or better. Like that's the barometer, right? You could always end up with like a Mitch Trubisky or a Trey Lance. That's obviously right. But I think that you've got a pretty good shot of a first round quarterback being decent. And I think that's where Kyler Murray is, except he's volatile and decent, right? You're like, no, yes, or no, guy, I told you, right? Those are the two no-nos with Kyler Murray. But he's still on balance, just like decent. So that's where I'm at. So I'd rather do Russell Wilson, $25-30 million next year. And you've got like, if you trust Kevin O'Connell as a coach, which I think from a quarterback perspective, you probably do, then I think you've got a chance to make the playoffs. I mean, defense is not going to be as good next year as it has been this year. That's just the nature of things. But, you got a pretty good shot at the playoffs while still being able to train a first-round quarterback.
So this happened earlier today. I was on Twitter, and I have the two accounts. I have my personal account, and I have the show's account. So I was on the show's account. Mainly football accounts are being followed there. And there was a Twitter ad that had popped up, and I hadn't noticed. And I saw, because I'm thinking football, I saw the word Mitch, and I was thinking Trubisky, because there's been a lot of discourse this week over whether or not benching him is the right call or whatever in Pittsburgh. He's terrible. It's the right call. But it was a thing about out fundraising Mitch O'Connell.
Oh.
And so, like, I was looking at it for a moment and I went,
Who's more scared of the left?
oh, that's... Wow, Arif.
Yeah, I nailed that one. Oh my god.
That actually hurts. I was trying to figure out why people were trying to fundraise against Mitch Trubisky today. Like, look, I know he stinks on ice, but why are you that angry?
Yeah, what funds do you need? Do you need to buy a billboard? What's going on?
It's on the right side of the road. Oh, that's enough. Raul asks, is Jaron Hall the most optimistic we've been about a drafted quarterback since Teddy Bridgewater?
I guess I was so I saw this question and I was like, no way. People aren't that hyped about Jaron Hall, and I know like people are pretty hyped about Jaron Hall. Like I'm not saying that people are down on it. There's people who are legitimately quite excited. I've seen a lot of comments saying, Arif, like you shouldn't like you as politely as possible. You shouldn't criticize Jaron Hall prematurely. I assure you, he will be good. This Sunday, you will see. You know, like that's the polite version of a lot of the comments I've seen. And that's like fine, right? Like people getting mad at me saying that Jaron Hall is probably not going to be that great. Cool. There's a pretty good chance that I'll be right, pretty good chance that I'll be wrong. And those people can either disappear or gloat. You know, that's just going to happen. It's the nature of the job. So I'm not saying that people aren't hyped about him, but I am saying like these are not the same category of hype, not remotely. Like Teddy played okay for a rookie in 2014, somewhat meaningfully improved in 2015, and people are still talking about how good he could have been based off of his preseason in 2016. Like James, I didn't plan that bit earlier in anticipation of this question. That's a bit that appeared naturally because of how hyped people were for Teddy. Like Teddy was supposed to be like a first overall pick for a small portion of that draft cycle before like people realized how tall Blake Bortles was and I guess how funny Johnny Manziel was. I don't know. But like, you know, Teddy was going to go 1-1 in some January mocks, right? Like, so when he fell to the Vikings at 32, people were out of their minds. Like
we celebrated. Enough, right? We celebrated in a post-draft episode where the three of us were giddy.
Yeah. Like yeah. Like people held parties after they drafted Teddy because they drafted Teddy, who, mind you, is the most charismatic quarterback in the history of the planet. So fair enough. But like, it's not in the same. So like, yeah, you're probably correct that this is the most hyped because people weren't that hyped about Kellen Mond, even though he was picked much earlier than Jaron Hall, just because the way that the Vikings talked about him, you're like, all right, there might not be something here. Right. And then like, what other rookie quarterbacks have there been since Teddy? Like they went from Teddy to Kirk, and then any rookie that they grabbed was like clearly going to be like Jake Browning. People were pretty excited about him, I guess, and I guess they should have been because he was pretty good for a backup. I mean, obviously this last week was, but like that's better than a lot of backups, I guess. So yeah, technically, I think this is the most optimistic people have been. I just don't think it's like fair to put them in the same sentence because like people were crazy optimistic about Teddy, me included.
Next question is going to be from A Second Jet Has Hit Drew Bledsoe. For Arif's Flores beating Goff corner, Goff historically can't handle the demands of playing quarterback when the blitz is getting to him. Flores and his love of the blitz needs no introduction. What did the Lions do to mitigate the effects of the blitz on Goff? Was it an O-line plan or was Goff just on his A game?
James, you realize like what like when you said out loud Flores beating Goff, like you realize what that like sounded like?
No. Oh,
I thought you understood. No, okay. So in this game, the Vikings were extraordinarily blitz heavy. They blitzed over 60% of the time because, I mean, that's like a problem with Jared Goff, right? Like that, and which is something that Jeremy Reisman identified in our interview with him. It's been something that's been kind of true for him for like quite a while, going back to his days with the Rams. It's been true in previous matchups with the Detroit Lions. So it made sense to have a blitz heavy game plan. So they blitzed a lot, 60% of the time. His time to throw when blitzed was 2.2 seconds. 2.2 seconds. That's crazy. That's so fast. That's so fast. You got rid of the ball so quickly. Data plan designed entirely around identifying where blitzers were coming from and beating the blitz by replacing that blitzer with a passer or a receiver, right? They were very good at that. Goff did not get sacked on any of the pressures that arrived on blitzes, and pressures primarily arrived on 3 and 4 man rushes and not on 6+ man rushes. Like that, like it was not a heavily pressured situation for him. He got rid of the ball really quickly and he dumped it off, and it wasn't really so much that that he was like beating them deep. It was that the Vikings weren't finishing their tackles, right? So he was doing his job, which was not remarkably demanding from the perspective of a quarterback. It's something that like not every quarterback can do. It's not something that every good quarterback can do to like make a decision that quickly. Even a relatively easy throw mechanically, right? Like a short one over the middle is a mechanically easy throw. You have to make that decision quickly, and that's a skill, and it's a very difficult skill. The Vikings missed their tackles like that. I don't know how else to put it. Like on blitzes, he averaged 7 yards an attempt, throwing 3.3 yards downfield, completing 85% of those passes. Like that's a tackling issue to me. That's tackling. You got to stop the screens. You got to stop the short dump offs. You got to stop the hot routes, and you got to have players there. Sometimes when you blitz, you don't have enough tacklers, but a lot of that is just tackling when you've got a player there and they miss, right? And some of that's tackling angles. Some of that's not even necessarily like they broke a tackle, but like some of that's like you just didn't get in position. Like you didn't realize Jahmyr Gibbs was that fast or something along those lines. So that's like a lot of it is that like that's how they beat the blitz. There was not a ton of deep throws against the blitz or anything like that. It was just, you missed your tackles. The Vikings had 12 missed tackles in that game. That's like, relatively speaking, that's like pretty huge. They allowed 152 yards after the catch. 152 yards after the catch. Do you know how many passing yards Jaren Hall had? 257. Like, that's the game. So that's what happened. It's not that like Goff did like Jake Browning, for example, did an incredible job creating versus the blitz. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, did a great job designing against the blitz. So that's really what happened. So I think it's still probably the case that Goff is not very good against the blitz, just generally as a quarterback. But that doesn't mean the Lions will consistently be if they game plan around the types of blitzes they see. So that's closer to like I think what happened.
Zach Dixon asks, the impact of injuries this season has felt especially high. Is there a way to measure this impact and compare it against other teams in the league or even against past Viking seasons?
So there's a couple of ways to do it. At the end of the year, each year, Football Outsiders used to, which doesn't exist anymore for legal battle reasons. There's a lot going on, but Football Outsiders doesn't exist. I imagine FTN Fantasy, who signed Aaron Schatz, where they host DVOA now, I imagine that they will have this up, but I don't know. Adjusted games lost, based off of the expected DVOA impact of the injuries that a team has suffered. Now, I think it tends to be a fairly crude metric and that it doesn't do a very good job capturing the particulars of the granularity. But from a broad view, it's very good. And the Vikings generally are on the positive side of adjusted games lost. They don't tend to suffer that many injuries, which I know like a lot of Vikings fans will listen to that and be like, what are you talking about? But like, yeah, actually relative to the rest of the league, for most of since 2010 essentially, so the 2011 to now era, the Vikings have been very good at avoiding injuries. There are some years where they haven't been. 2015 is a very good year where they just constantly got injured, and it turns out they were, I think, the third most injured team in the league that year. And then they fired, like I think right after that, Zimmer fired was it Evan Wood, the former strength and conditioning guy there. Last year, the Vikings were very lucky extremely lucky injury-wise. So like a lot of years, the Vikings actually are closer to the top than the bottom of that list, even though for the most part, it should be kind of like a luck sort of thing. Sometimes it's not always that. If Football Outsiders does an adjusted games lost thing, then we'll have some context. I do know that Pro Football Focus has the tools to project lost wins above replacement, which you, I guess, would want to call losses above replacement, but that sucks. I'd rather call it negative wins than losses in the context of this particular type of statistic. So lost wins above replacement due to injury is something that they've got the capability of doing. Maybe I've missed an article or something like that. I haven't seen them ever do that, especially at the end of a year. But I do know that that's possible given the model that Eric Eager and a couple of their data guys helped construct to produce PFF wins above replacement. Is that the whole idea is that you can pull a player out of that model, stick a replacement level player or a known quantity player into that model and get a pretty good understanding. And this model is actually, it's actually genuinely quite good. When it was debuted as part of, they didn't actually ever debut it, when it became incorporated into Pro Football Focus's Green Line product, it was a huge hit. And so Green Line is their product that allows them to attempt to bet against the spread. And its opening, so it usually got bet down, its opening beat Vegas 57% of the time. That's really good. So when you got the new Green Line data, when that came out Tuesday morning or something, that was better than the Vegas opening line, which is a huge, excellent metric. So this is a fairly precise tool. Now I don't know if it does that anymore. I would imagine that it doesn't. Vegas is really good at correcting when it comes to like spreads and money lines. Not as much on props at least, but that's true. But yeah, when that debuted, it did a very good job, which to me suggests it's a pretty robust model, which if they did a retrospective, these are how many games or wins that have been lost due to injury, I would love it. Now, Eric Eager now works at Sumer Sports, not at PFF. He's the one that like designed and ran the model, but PFF has the proprietary rights to it unless something happened when Eric Eager left where he attained the rights to it. But I don't know if that's the case. I would be surprised if it was because it's pretty reliant on PFF data. But I would like it if they published that. That would be really cool and be really good and useful to have.
Next question is going to be from Jack, who asks, with the loss of Hawkinson and the additional loss of Addison for this week, we're going with the kid. KO and Kwesi have been pretty clear in their dedication to Kirk, so I suppose my question is, does Hall have any chance here, or is this just for us to see what we have at backup? On a related note, what are the odds we end up going quarterback if our front office has already said they want Kirk?
I don't think that a quarterback is off the table, but I think that the threshold for them to draft a quarterback is a bit higher than it is for like other teams who don't have a quarterback under contract, which by the time the draft starts, I mean, the Kirk situation will have been resolved. But yeah, I think that if like in a hypothetical scenario, if Drake May falls to the Vikings at like 12 or wherever they pick, yeah, they'd say yes, right? They'd be like, all right, yeah, bring him in. But they're not going to necessarily, I don't think, it can't be absolutely certain. I don't think they're going to trade up for a guy. I don't think they're going to reach for a guy that they think is like the 27th player on their board and they're picking at 12 and they're just like, hey, we just need a quarterback. Let's get Jaden Daniels or something. Which honestly, if they drafted Jaden Daniels, I'd be very excited. He's a very exciting player. So I don't think that, a quarterback is likely. I think that it would take a bit more for them to draft a quarterback than a lot of other teams. So there's that. Maybe in the second or third round, I think that would be a really good idea because it seems like this is a draft that's going to be full of second round quality quarterbacks. Now, mind you, I sometimes think this a lot, not a ton, but sometimes I'm like, hey, there's a couple of second round guys. And then they tend to get drafted between the second and fifth rounds. And it's like, hey, I thought that guy was going to go in the second round. He went to the fifth round. That's crazy. That just happens sometimes, right? But it seems like for now, that's my assessment of it. Or rather my assessment of the landscape of it, because I haven't been doing as much individual work on it or anything like that. But following other people, that seems to be the consensus. So yeah, second or third round, I could see it. That said, I do think Hall has a chance, right? Like I think that they might raise that threshold by which they would draft a quarterback if Hall plays really well here, and then which would give him an opportunity against the Lions, plays well against the Lions, right? And then you're like, oh, okay. 2 games is not a lot to go off of. It's what I mentioned this to Justice 2 or 3 times. It's what tricked Washington about Sam Howell, right? It almost tricked Carolina about Sam Darnold, but they had the number 1 overall pick, so don't got to worry about that. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. It tricked the Jets for a couple of years with Geno Smith, who turned out to end up being pretty good, but he would finish multiple seasons in a row with some strong games. You could just carry that into the next season. So, you got to be careful about that. But I do think that if he plays really well, he could maybe not force the Vikings' hands, but move the Vikings out of the potential of drafting a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round. But I do think that the front office is going to do a lot to attempt to re-sign Kirk.
From Cody, for our Reeves UW-Madison alumni corner, Nate Tice's latest mock draft has the Vikings selecting Iowa's Cooper DeJean. Let's go with that.
Yeah,
at pick 15. Would DeJean work well as a cornerback in the Flores scheme? And would you be okay with the Vikings re-signing Kirk? We'll ignore that part. So DeJean in the Flores scheme.
So Nate actually in that mock draft, which we'll link in the show notes, Nate does a really good job. It's a much longer mock draft than the ones that people are used to, and justifiably so. But the first pick is 2 pages. It's a film breakdown of Drake May. But spoilers, first pick is Drake May. It's a lot, and some picks only have 4 paragraphs, which by the way, most of your mock drafts will be 1, maybe 2 paragraphs. So it's still kind of a lot. And I see some with 2 paragraphs, right? But he wrote a fairly decent amount on Cooper DeJean and in his fit in a Flores scheme. And then he also has some tweets about it. And I think that there's something to be said about how Nate characterized it. So, draft him as an outside corner, but the thing is he can do a lot of stuff. So you can put him in the slot, you can make him play safety type roles, and have him just kind of move everywhere. Now, you do have to be a little bit careful about the way this conversation evolves, because thanks to Rashard Mendenhall, we're fairly aware of the biases at play in this kind of conversation. Now, it's not the same as Bill Polian asking Lamar Jackson to switch from quarterback to wide receiver, but saying Cooper DeJean should play safety carries with it some weird racial baggage because he's white, and we don't have white cornerbacks aside from the other guy from Iowa who got drafted in the 3rd round and is a backup right now for the Denver Broncos. Probably will start eventually, but Riley Moss, I think, right? Riley and Cooper. I'm concerned now. But there's something weird going on. But just based off of his skill set, he's primarily an outside corner. But if you've got an outside corner that can play the nickel and can blitz and can hang over the top and can play a little bit of linebacker, that's something to kind of keep in mind. Now, mind you, cornerback is a more valuable position than safety. So on most plays, you'd want this guy on the outside covering deep targets, right? He's really good at that stuff. But just like you have Khalil Mack drop into coverage every so often for the Raiders, just like you have Danielle Hunter do it for the Vikings every so often, you're gonna move a guy around from his most optimal every snap position to another position because the overall impact is better, even if the individual play impact is worse. And he is a really versatile chess piece in that respect. So, yeah, I think he'd actually be a great fit in the Flores scheme. Now, mind you, Flores does not do a ton of man coverage. To me, this guy seems a little bit more capable as a man coverage guy. I don't know for sure, right? So I could be 100% very wrong about this. But just based off of the stuff that I have seen, which is very scant, he seems like a better man-to-man guy than a zone guy. But could be wrong about that, and it seems like he's capable in both. That's why he's being mocked at 15. I think he got mocked at 12 by Nate earlier a couple months ago. He's a good player, right? And he's been on people's radars for a while. But yeah, I think that based off of kind of what we know, I mean, he would be a really great fit because of his versatility, which is what the scheme really values, right? So, that's something to kind of keep in mind. Also, he's a really great punt returner. The Vikings don't really have a good punt returner. He's got to be careful about the fair catches, though. lost a game against our Minnesota Golden Gophers because he accidentally called a fair catch, and that is an accurate description of events that we will not need to go into.
Well, I suppose there is that. Next question is going to be from the Room Bolsharif, who asks, better mascot reaction to a clutch field goal? The drop to the knees, oh my god, or the bang your head against the field goal post?
I think it depends on the mascot, right? Like, I think if you've got like a mascot that tends on the cute side, the drop to the knees, oh my god, kind of works. But if you've got a mascot that is like unsettling or angry, like the Broncos mascot, what's his name, Shock or something? I don't know. Kind of a weird name for it's got to be a different name. Who looks like he's just angry, or if it's like the Philly Fanatic or something like that, like banging your head against a goalpost is peak. That's clearly the better reaction. So it really depends on the vibe of the mascot. The Vikings mascot's kind of in a curious spot there. I think he's more of a drop to your knees, oh my god guy. I think that works better for him than banging his head against the goalpost. But a lot of mascots just feel like it's more definitive one or the other.
Next question is from the pessimistic Minnesota sports fan. For the offensive language corner, during the latest pod, Arif applauded his guest for using the phrase "bite them in the behind" as an offensive phrase toward bees that encourages assaulting animals, along with the same lines as beating a dead horse or killing two birds with one stone. How does Arif justify the use of such vulgar language on a supposedly bee-friendly podcast?
Okay, so I don't think that any horse podcasts that say beating a dead horse are anti-horse, or any bird podcasts, of which there's probably a ton, right? Like birding is very popular. It seems like it's perfect for podcasts. I don't think that they get offended at killing two birds with one stone. I think this is looking for offense when there's none there. Also, it's clearly not a reference to bees. You're just inventing stuff here. We're inventing oppressions, a thing that I've always talked about and have been against and have railed about and made my personality.
Yes, always.
Yeah. So, there's that. Also, complete side note, I did not realize The Beekeeper was not about a beekeeper until I saw the ad today. They're just the group of government operatives or whatever they are just named beekeepers.
Well, it goes deeper than that, which is why we're going to have to review the film in February.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, it would be against Discord's terms of service to do a watch along,
even if we're the only people in the theater.
Right. Yeah. Or like even like if someone had managed to find a way to acquire a review copy, right? That you can provide the Oscar committee, which obviously
screener,
the Beekeeper would, a screener. And it would be against Discord's terms of service to air it in the Discord for a watch along with other members of the Discord Patreon. We wouldn't ever do that. We wouldn't suggest that we would do that. I'm just saying that'd be kind of a fun theoretical activity. But yeah, certainly after something like that would occur, we would have to review the film for the podcast. I'm very excited, obviously, but I am a little disappointed that it seems to contain fewer bees than I initially thought. You're suggesting that actually bees do make an appearance?
Yes.
Okay.
I've read the summary. I'm familiar with where this rabbit hole goes.
Oh, okay. Well, don't tell me. I would like to find out through the weirdest of circumstances and or the movie itself.
Well, I'll be around the first weekend in February. We'll
fantastic.
We'll make this work some way, somehow. It's time for another car episode, right? Right. Let's go to Tank B, who asks, for James's relationship corner, how many metric tons of carbon dioxide would you produce for love?
This is a very good question. Would you fly all the way to Argentina and back?
Am I in business class? Because that's kind of a deal breaker. I'm too tall for
it. It doesn't the same amount of carbon dioxide. Sure.
Well, if that's the case, then yeah, I'd probably fly to Argentina for a concert I was going to be mentioned on stage for. Yeah, probably. Okay,
that's not the point. Is the love part, James?
Love is like yeah, you'll.
Okay, we are definitely asking the wrong person here.
I'm only mostly jaded. It's fine. Like, I've
Look,
moved.
I know a lot of people.
I've moved from love to money. Like we're fine.
That's extremely jaded. I know like a lot of people are in the every relationship except my current one has failed situation, but like I feel like it's a fairly extreme one for you.
Well, yeah. There's.
We asked the wrong person. That said, if you could be assured of true love and also like a good relationship, those are two different things. You know, great communicator, is on the same page as you.
Who's more afraid of the left or Reeve?
Look, I just want to answer this question, James. Okay, so you fall in love with someone and have the means to travel to them, say every other week. They're across the country. That person will eventually. You are guaranteed that it will not forever be a long distance relationship. It will be a short distance relationship in the somewhat near future. That person has great chemistry with you. It is true love. You guarantee that they are mentally stable, which I understand is like a paradox of being in a relationship with you, but run with me here. They are very good at communicating. They are
I know, but wow.
If I wasn't going to say it, you were definitely going to say it. So someone had to get out of it.
That's not the point, but yeah.
They're a great communicator. They have a very good moral foundation for understanding the obligations that occur in a relationship with push and pull. They'll make you a better person without making you feel bad about not being a better person. This is the perfect relationship.
Have you been listening to my therapist? Is that what's going on here? I'm confused.
No, I just want to know how many how much are you going to kill the earth for this person?
I would kill the earth a lot.
Okay, that's all I needed.
Yeah, an absolute lot. I'd like to think
an absolute lot.
Bye
bye Bangladesh. It's gone.
Well, they kind of had it coming. But shrug. But, you know, I'd like to think that if I had the financial means to be able to do this and do it comfortably, both financially and physically, that I would be able to do some form of like offset. Like maybe I am also providing some way, shape, or form.
I was going to bring this up, but it did feel like a cop out.
Yeah, in some way, shape, or form, like be able to like, oh, well, I'm going to, pay for all of these trees to like be planted and everything.
I will point out that studies suggest that offsets are BS. So I do want to put that out there, that offsets actually don't work from what we understand.
Well,
but again,
I have enough money. I have enough money. I have enough money to not care about whether or not it's that. Yeah, I'm there for the optic, and that's it.
I'm just saying, like, we crafted a hypothetical where you were assured of true love. So a world where offsets actually work is probably not a huge leap after that.
Yeah, we're past the uncanny valley. as far as like what's possible and what's believable. Logan Bullsharif asks, question for a Reef's gift giving corner. I listened to your advice last episode for what to get my wife for Christmas and ground up some Ozempic and put it into her oatmeal. She's very upset, but surprisingly, once I suggested that you said it, that this is what she should get, she's now mad at you and I am totally absolved. This is more of a comment, but she says to tell you, watch out, Arif.
Okay, first of all, I feel like she should still be upset at you for listening to like a random podcaster about what to get your wife for Christmas. I feel like if Joe Rogan gave me bad dating advice and I followed through on it, that person would be justified in being mad at me for following through on it and not having the emotional intelligence to understand what a partner in a relationship would need. And also Joe Rogan for just generally being bad at stuff.
Joe Rogan for just being Joe Rogan.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so in that sense, like, yeah, I'm not saying she shouldn't be mad at me in this scenario. Yeah. That is definitely not real, because we made it very clear that this is not real advice for sure this time. Like, we outlined and signposted the fact that this is not real advice. So actually she shouldn't be mad at us. But in the hypothetical scenario where we're like, yeah, you should definitely, like, by the way, this is a violation of bodily autonomy. Like, you should not do this. Like, this is,
do not drug
this should
your
be
wife.
Considered
do not
assault.
Drug your wife. Yeah.
Yeah. So to be clear, that's what this is. Don't do that. In a world where she doesn't see this as assault, I guess, first of all, I would love for her to love herself more. Second of all, she should still be mad at you. And if I suggested this seriously and you followed through on it, yeah, of course she should be mad at me. I think that her ability to enact retributive justice is a little bit more accessible through you than through me. So watch yourself, Logan.
Yeah. Also, question for James and Arif's relationship corner. Marry, make love to, or murder the moms of the Christmas movies. Elf, Home Alone, or the Muppet Christmas Carol. Is this where I disclose that I've never actually seen Elf?
It's okay. It's good. It's one of those things that's like good, but it's like way overrated at the same time. So it's tough for me to like talk about it too much.
Because that came out like early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't like I don't know when it happened that I stopped being like a Christmas guy. Because as a kid, I was super into Christmas and everything, but like shortly after I turned 18, I just stopped being about Christmas. People I've
18,
dated,
wow.
People I've dated have been into it. Again, I don't know if that's when it happened, but at some point, I just like a switch flipped. Like as far as Christmas decorations in my place right now, I have a tree. My son put something up, and I have a wreath on my door, and like that's it. I don't do, and it's not a wreath either. It's like an actual like.
Well, that's not a product we
well,
make, right? That's not a product we make.
It can be, but no, it's like I have like that. I never got really into Christmas, so like seeing that as a Christmas movie is not. I would not have gone out of my way to do that. I would have been busy hanging out with friends or like being broken up with when that movie came out. Like I wasn't really into that.
Okay.
I don't have a frame of reference.
So okay, so
I'm going to defer to you. I'm deferring to you on this.
Okay. It's been such a long time since I've seen Elf. I do like the actress that plays the mom in Home Alone, but like the mom herself, like the character, it just feels like that's a really tough.
Yeah, but she's a 1%er. You could marry that.
Oh God, that's a good point. I didn't think about it like that. I was just like, that's a tough relationship to be in. And you probably have to deal with like the giant family and all the kids, and one of the kids is like a demon, but he's kind of justified, you know? Like, kind of get it.
Like he's a sociopath, but he's like worth it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So like, that I was gonna say that's the make love to, because I just don't want to be in a relationship with that, and so then I would marry the mom from Elf, and then I'm not marrying a Muppet because the mom in Muppet Christmas Carol is Fozzie.
No, the
right?
the mom in the mom in the Muppet Christmas Carol that they're talking about is Miss Piggy.
Also, that's worse. She's bad. She's an abuser.
Truth.
That way worse. Okay, yeah.
So that Tiny Tim, who does not die, is fine, but Miss Piggy's gonna die.
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. There you go. Yep.
Well, I'm glad we solved
that. Zero chance is the first time someone said that on a podcast.
Truth. Damian Barrett asks, question for Arif's employee care corner. Just how unfit would one of your writers need to be to fail a medical and see you guaranteeing them $37 million?
First of all, the phrase my writers suggests that I employ them. I do not. I do not employ any writers. There are... I mean, some would call them uncharitably gig workers. I think that that's unfair.
Gig work is still work.
I would say, you know, they seek out the opportunity my platform provides, and they provide me with something that helps me, and I provide them with something that helps them.
I'm reminded of that tweet that just kept getting edited with a new image when the dude was trying to get people to work for his football project. They're volunteers. And the whole thing. The image just kept getting nicer, but that was the one thing that kept getting edited. And he didn't understand why people kept dunking on him.
So for people unfamiliar, I think it was Andy Benoit, actually, at 33rd Team, was like, hey, we need some people to like write about football. We need 2 writers. We need someone who's analytically minded and someone who does like, who's going to do like the grunt work of film work, right? I think that's what it was, right? But instead of like, we want to hire 2 writers, it was, we're looking for volunteers to do what is clearly like, and there were like requirements, right? Like you need to have proficiency in both Excel and Python, right? Like that's a skill that you pick up, right? That's a monetizable skill. You're asking people for like, and like experience doing it. And like, so there's a lot of expertise you're asking of people. And so it's both a significant time commitment to be an analytics writer or a film grunt. Like that's a lot of time. And it's a skill requirement because you need to have a lot of familiarity either with like the ins and outs of particular types of football or with like data analysis, right? And so they said like volunteers, right? And so people were like, that's really after like, I would have been happier if you'd said interns, honestly. That's crazy that you said volunteers. And they're like, no, we'll pay them, I guess. But the reason we said volunteers is because we wanted people who were like really committed to football. And it's like, okay, that you're not helping actually yourself here at all. That sounds worse.
Yeah, they're not slaves, they're indentured servants.
Yeah, it's just for the love of the game. Like what? No. Mm-mm. Nah. It's just they work for you. They're employees. So you should. There's not even a salary range in here. That's actually illegal now in some states. What's the salary range? Like it's just like. It's just like got worse and worse and worse. So yeah, that it's like that. Except that's bad and I'm good. That's the difference.
Yeah, I'm just in it for the profit sharing, and when those profits happen, I will absolutely
also, I will
not
decide what defines a profit. So yeah, we're good.
When those profits happen, I will likely not be on writing for the website. These two things may be related. Let's go to Kyle Segal, who actually wrote an email.
Yeah, I'm shocked he knows how to operate one.
I may need your help with pronouncing some of this. Kyle Segal. First off, thank you, Norse Code, for saving my life. After spending years in the hospital due to consuming pink thyme mayo, the doctors were finally able to figure out the cause, thanks to you, and be able to treat my Serratia maricensis infection.
Sure, I don't know how it's pronounced. Whoever actually knows how it's pronounced, you know what we mean.
Yeah. While one would expect doctors to not require the assistance of a Minnesota Vikings podcast to determine what has ailed a man for 8 years, we of course must acknowledge that I live in America, and I am subservient, I'm using that word very intentionally, to our medical system, and also, of course, to the fact that aside from being the Chargers' top beat reporter, Arif is also one of the country's most renowned licensed medical professionals.
I'm not licensed. I'm not a medical professional. Nothing in this podcast constitutes medical advice.
Our own Doogie Howser, if you will, fitting, considering the show was based in Los Angeles, much like his beloved Chargers, and also for the fact that Arif is commonly mistaken for a bald child. Second,
okay, I have not been mistaken for a bald child in years.
Literal years here, people. Multiple. Hey, Arif, who's more afraid of the left? Secondly, when we're looking at the staggering amount of injuries that our team has faced this year, at what point should someone's job be in jeopardy? We've heard of training staff leadership lose their positions due to a team having several injuries within the season. Is that possibly the case here, or is it more of the variance that has bounced back with a furious vengeance comparable only to that which my innards suffered through over the past several years? Decades of getting away with eating day-old bar food was bound to even out eventually.
Yeah, I guess that's how food karma works. Okay, so I'll say this. The injury issue for the Vikings with it, like, which is almost entirely localized to this year, is not really like it's almost certainly a product of variance, right? Almost every bad injury situation in the NFL bounces back. Now, there are some situations where, like with the Chargers, you're just like, okay, there's something going on. But like that one's kind of a tough one to nail down because they have, and again, we use this word a lot, but like it's important to, dig down. Famously fired their athletic training staff several times. And they have played in San Diego and Los Angeles on like 3 different playing surfaces, and they keep getting injured. And like sometimes it's okay, the doctor stabbed the starting quarterback in the lung. That one's, we know where that happened, right? We know what the risks were that led to that incident. The risk was a doctor stabbing a patient. Okay, got it. Like, it's not as if like, oh, well, you haven't been using free weights, so you haven't been building up your stabilizing muscles. So when you got into the situation where you needed to exert that in order to make sure that your knee didn't bend the wrong way, we didn't do this. Well, our training regimen was at fault. And that's something that you can't identify in the moment because it's not like you work out and then you immediately get injured. It's like it occurs over, several weeks or even months or years, right? Like it's not like that, right? Where like the cause might be something that's very difficult to identify, or it could be a multitude of causes like an injury history, a bad training regimen, a bad nutrition regimen, a bad sleep regimen, and a bad training, like in terms of like spacing out like the time in practice or load management problem. Like those are all co-collaborative essentially in producing an injury, right? So it's really difficult. It's not just like an athletic training staff. The Vikings brought in one of the I don't know if it's like vice president or second in command or whatever you would say, but one of the key figures of the Rams injury department or the Rams sports science department in for injury management. And actually, there were a couple of stories profiling how good he was at his job last year when the Vikings had very few injuries relative to the rest of the league. And so I think it'd be maybe premature to get rid of him. And maybe he actually has no control over this and life is random and cruel. Who's to say this podcast has no opinion on that question? But, if he has no control, then also doesn't make sense to fire this guy. So I think you probably have to have like 3 years in a row of like pretty bad injury luck before you're like, okay, there's a problem here. And even then, you probably have to identify if the injuries are all pretty similar. Because if one of them is, a 300-pound player stepped on my quarterback's leg, and the other one is, this guy tore a pec attempting to block a defensive lineman. Like, those are different, right? They may have the same cause, but they likely, right, because a lot of quarterbacks do survive getting stepped on without an injury. But, like, a lot of them don't have the same cause. So there may be a training issue somewhere, but it'd be hard to identify. So there has to be, which is the reason why Mike Zimmer fired, again, I think his name was Evan Wood, because the Vikings had like a rash of pectoral injuries. And it just feels like that's if they're all the same, there's probably something happening, right? Maybe, but like, I'm not 100% confident on that. But like, you have to do like an analysis of like why these injuries are occurring, how these injuries can come to occur, and whether or not somebody in a training staff would be able to like resolve it. So no, I don't think that there's anything that needs to be kind of, dealt with here. But that Chargers thing is like weird, huh?
Yeah, very. Finally, we have a question from a listener's wife.
God, this is always bad.
Well,
for me,
I don't know if this one's necessarily going to be bad.
Okay, great.
This is from Rebecca. Just let's have a little bit of faith.
I just look. I'm just saying, the listeners have put it on me when the relationship with their significant other goes south, and then the significant other has like thoughts.
There is a history of this.
Except the sour cream thing, I think we established that was just the listener's fault.
Yeah, that was absolutely the listener's fault. If we're gonna bring up sour cream again, Rebecca says, just baiting them. For Arif and James, my husband listens to your podcast religiously and is constantly talking about it. In fact, we are so close to having an Arif shower curtain. But we are having an ongoing debate, and I was hoping you might be able to address it on your podcast. Is it important to water cut Christmas trees? My husband refuses, and because of a knee injury, I can't. Our tree is so dry, and the pine needles are everywhere. This has been ongoing for years. Please be the voice of reason. He will only listen to you. Trees need water. I feel like James must be an expert in this.
Okay, Rebecca, the way this podcast works is that if someone is an expert in something, the other person answers it. I am so sorry that it has come to that. But
as it turns out, I'm absolutely not an expert in this.
Yeah, and I knew the answer immediately without having to do. James was like, "Hey, you may have to do research on this one." I was like, "Absolutely not." And I went into answering it for James because for some reason I thought it was like a because we do our Patreon questions beforehand if we do them, and so I just went into it, and James was like, hold it, just relax. We're gonna answer this one on air." I was like, "Oh, okay, great." Okay. And James also has marshaled additional resources. So we are backed up with evidence. And then also in the meantime, I was like, I'm so confident. Hey, that's where people get in trouble. So I'm going to look this up too. So I did do some additional research after. But here's the thing. So I go to my brother's for Christmas every year. People are like familiar with this. Well, one thing is that my brother tries to get and mostly succeeds in getting a live tree for a Christmas tree every year. Fantastic. He has complained a lot about doing the maintenance on that tree, which includes watering it. And this year's tree, for example, is, for whatever reason, a little bit thirstier than normal. So it takes in a lot more water than most trees. These are plants. When you take plants out of the ground, they don't like die just because you did that. They're like still living unless they have a reason not to be, which I'm sorry,
dark.
Rebecca's husband. It sounds like there's a reason not to be.
Yeah.
Because you're. Is there a word for starvation, but with water? I feel like I need to know this. I feel like that's a common term.
Starvation, but with water? Are you talking dying?
Well, yeah, when you actively starve someone.
Like,
what's the active
someone?
verb instead of like? Yeah, I guess you could dehydrate someone, but it feels weird. Like
that sounds like a supervillain thing. Like, I will dehydrate you as I go to my volcano lair and walk away without seeing you actually die.
Right, like if you deny a captive food, you're starving them, and also they are suffering from starvation. If you deny a captive water, they are suffering from dehydration, but you're not like dehydrating them. That's like we put food in a dehydrator, right? Like that's different. Anyway, whatever that is, you're doing it to a tree, and it seems like you have like years of evidence to suggest. Okay, Rebecca's husband, I am so glad you listened to this podcast. I love our listeners. And I'm going in on you pretty hard. And the reason for that is because I'm right. You have to understand that that's just how I operate. But I do appreciate that you listen. It's just important for you to know that most people are not cleaning up like dry pine needles everywhere until several days after Christmas when it's time, right? Because the tree also needs soil and you are starving it in addition to dehydrating it, right? Like that's the thing. Most people with their real life Christmas trees that have been cut from the lot are not dealing with like the really dry and the pine needles fall off. I've run into this. My brother got a tree that was too big this year, which he's like proud of that fact, but also he's like, this is kind of inconvenient how big it is. I've like run into this tree several times, not like into it, but like I'm trying to get around it and I'm brushing up against the branches all the time. And there's very few needles that drop onto the ground. And we're constantly running around and walking past it and hitting the tree and stuff like that, just because it's like right next to this table. It's fine. And it's because my brother waters it every night. Like a 6-foot tree is supposed to get like a gallon of water a week in terms of water. Like there's guides on this. So I looked this up. I was like, I'm very confident about this fact. And I was like, you know what? I'm not an expert in this area, so I will Google it. And I guess Michigan State University has thoughts on this. They very definitively think that you should be watering your tree. This is a thing. So this is published in like November 16th of this year. They contacted their own Department of Horticulture and Department of Forestry. And there's like 2 authors on this and they cite a bunch of sources, whatever. Get a fresh tree, get it freshly cut. Right before you put it in a tree stand, you want to cut a 1/2 inch to 1 inch off. I know most people don't do that, but that's what's in here, right? After trees are cut from the farm, that cut might begin to dry out, and that resin can clog the water that is important. It can clog the water conducting tissues in the trunk that's important to bring up water up into the tree and keep it healthy. So you cut it again to expose the already hydrated and non-resined parts of that tree that will maximize water intake. So a fresh tree, according to Michigan State University, can use up to 1 quart of water per day for each inch of diameter on the cut end. A typical 7-foot tall tree may have a 3-inch trunk diameter, so will need up to 3 quarts of water per day. If your tree is taking up a lot of water, this is actually a good sign and indicates this tree is staying fresh and hydrated. Okay, James has an even better example of doing our research for an episode, which I don't want to get in the habit of making our listeners think we do research answering these questions.
Yeah,
I was just so confident.
This is rare. Let's go with that. So personally, I've never had a real tree. Again, I'm not a huge Christmas person. However,
also that's like normal. I don't want to like shame people for not getting like that's fine.
Yeah,
that's normal.
I've never had one. However, I happen to be friends with somebody who is dating and I swear I'm not making this up, a Christmas tree farmer. That is what he does.
The only way that could be like more James is if you were dating.
If I was dating the Christmas tree farmer.
Yeah.
Look, after the funeral director,
like
things
the
have
mortician.
Yeah, things have gotten a little less crazy as far as like the odd job sort of thing.
It went from foot fetish model to mortician, and then like
there were a lot of steps along the way to get to that point. Let me be perfectly clear. There were a lot.
All perfectly valid professions. I'm just, unusual.
Gig work is still work. So
gig work is still work.
I was I just texted her and said, "Hey, if you're next to your boyfriend, let me know." And I got a response back with, "Are you kidding?" Like
it was a picture of him just being disgruntled at the camera.
Like, oh, that's right. He's
Please
taller
tell
than
him you're
me.
kidding.
He's taller than me. I forgot. He does have that bit of a menacing thing. So yes, the answer is yes, they do need to. And from this Christmas tree expert said yes, and quote, and they need a fresh cut of at least a half inch off the trunk right before they go into the water, as they create a sap seal after they cut to preserve the moisture. So yes, you're absolutely accurate, and we have a literal Christmas tree expert to provide expertise on that too. So. Yeah,
but like, why? I just gotta know why wasn't he Googling this after years of argumentation? I have to know.
Because, well, you've never been in a situation where you were just absolutely like, right, I'm absolutely right, and then, found out later that you were totally wrong.
That's my whole life. The only difference. That's all I do. The only difference is I don't remember it because my brain protects me.
Oh, maybe it was a version like that. I don't know. But I hope this settled your marriage. I say settled your marriage. Hopefully, this settled your argument, and the tree will be healthier next year. So that is it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back next week to discuss the Packers game without their number one corner. We didn't talk about it, but it definitely came up in the interview. And then just flipping a coin here. And after that, we can also discuss that we'll also be previewing the final game of the season against the Lions. So that is it for this episode of Norse Code. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So I've actually 2 pieces coming up on the Substack tomorrow, which for most of you will be the same day you'll be listening to this episode, which, I mean, almost assuredly is. Which first is a piece by Luke Braun, where he like pretends to be his own pet rabbits or something. I don't really know how that boy's mind works, but it's about Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins. Something ain't right with that kid. And then also later in the day, I'll also publish a piece from James about the Hell League and the finals and stuff like that. So those pieces are going up, which means I'm going to be moving my Friday recap to Saturday. I've already got a piece up at Norse Code, or at the Wide Left Substack, about the MVP debate, because it like shifted radically after the Monday night game between the 49ers and the Ravens, and I think
hilariously
that's, like, really
so.
Yeah,
hilariously so.
And so I think that just like proves that the MVP is like a very stupidly decided award. So I wrote about that. Turns out I thought I was going to write like 1,000 words. It ended up being like 3,500. It's like, so when you get around like 3,500 words and you start putting like graphics and stuff in there, Substack tells you, hey, you're getting like, this thing is pretty long. Like Substack will tell you, it's like, hey, this is getting pretty long. This might not fit into people's inboxes. In fact, we're going to cut it off. It's not going to fit into people's inboxes. So you need to cut like 200 words out. And I was like, oh my God, okay, this part's irrelevant. So I cut it down, but then I'm like adding more graphics. And I'm like, oh, I actually didn't explain my point clearly here. So I like add more. So I cut 400 words out, and I got like the thing that it's like, it's not too long anymore. Well, it doesn't say that. It just, the thing disappears. And then I'm like, oh, I got to put this all back in. And I added like 500 words. Whatever. It's long and it's about the MVP debate being stupid. Please read it because I just feel like it's got away from me and it's got to feel worth it. So if you read it, that helps. Anyway, that's over at wideleftpost.substack.com. My Substack is called Wide Left. Luke writes there. James writes there, I guess. Sorry, it's very recent. So
It is.
James is like, hey, I have an idea. And I was like, why not? I write there sometimes, occasionally. It's my Substack, one would hope. And then you can also find me on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL.
That's it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back next week. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that you should probably just put that in a garage next time. And we'll be back next year. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan. And he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.